Hello there, everyone. That just caught me off guard there because I was trying to make sure that my volume on YouTube was turned down, so I wasn't like all the other twats to go, "Hello, how are you doing?" And then 2 seconds later, "Hello, how are you doing?" So I caught it. I remembered I caught it, but you caught me off guard, even though I was the one who pushed the fucking button. Anyway, hello everybody, and welcome to a cat stream. I know it's been a while. You know what I'm like. I'm fat. I'm lazy. I don't give a shit. But I'm here now, so maybe it's a good idea. I don't know. I'm here tonight with Jensen Quinn.
Hello.
Yay! I've got them trained tonight, and I've got Mr. Crumplepoint as well.
Good evening.
Yay! I've got two trained ones. Yay!
He whips us regularly to make sure we're trained properly. I just want everyone to know this.
Yeah, but to be fair, you keep on asking for double helpings, even though you know what you're doing.
Yeah, there's that. True, that's true.
So how has everybody actually been? Because it's been a while since I've actually been on and I've seen everybody. How is everybody? What's everybody up to? What's everybody doing?
Well, I've had my usual round of fun with my internet and only really got back on today. So, yay, I'm back. But otherwise, I'm good, thank you.
Very well. Fair enough. That's why you never date a virgin. They never know what they're doing. What about you, Mr. Crumplepoint? How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. It's been a funny week or so because, as you know, I do comic videos, but I've been feeling quite uninspired recently. I've been trying to focus on stuff I actually want to talk about, but we've reached a tipping point where I'm really struggling for material that isn't just bitching. So I've been meditating on that for the last week or so. It's been interesting. What about yourself?
I haven't been doing too bad. I'm in the same sort of position as you, actually, to be fair, but for different reasons. I've kind of really become disenfranchised with the idea of politics. I've become really disenfranchised with the idea of doing things. So I've kind of gone for like the low-hanging fruit and gone for religious zealots and flat earthers. So something's going well. Oh, I'm going for Russell Brand as well tomorrow, so you'll enjoy me tearing apart Russell Brand tomorrow, so that should be interesting.
So long as I don't have to fucking listen to him, please just quote him.
No, I have to let him speak because it's word salad, especially for the second video. It's literally just word salad. Literally, it's like, oh, we have to make sure that they're healthy, and then it's a case of literally the next sentence. But, you know, if we just make sure that everybody's happy, then they'll be healthy anyway. And it's just like, no, Russell, that's not how healthiness happens. You can't just say, oh, yeah, I'm happy, but you have cancer. Yeah, that's not going to help you. Sorry. I know it's a bit more...
Yeah, that guy is just... He just talks. Like, it's just words happen, and his career continues, and it's astounding to me.
I'll tell you what, I don't know if any of you have seen him recently, but he looks really old now. Like even more so than what he used to. His beard is all scraggly, it's starting to turn grey at the tips. His hair's starting to recede even though it's long at the back. He just looks so lonely by himself as well.
He's an odd one because it's like my issues with Russell Brand aren't so much with Russell Brand, but to do with the actual influence he has, because I do believe him to be quite dangerous in that he intellectualizes his own, let's say, neuroticisms and apathy, and then people, particularly younger people, look at that and go, oh, right, he's made a name for himself, he's got off drugs, he lives quite a good life, and his views are casual, lazy Marxism. I can do that too. And it's like, he got really lucky, guys. You do not want to be listening to this guy.
No, considering that the path that you had to take to actually fucking get there. The thing is with Russell Brand, everybody has to remember the fact of how much into drugs and alcohol he really was. And the narcissism was so real that he would fuck his own boss's daughters. And don't get me wrong, some of us would probably go, yeah, put this into perspective. You're on like 180 grand a year, 200 grand a year, 500 grand a year. All you got to do is not fuck your bloody boss's daughter, and you've got a job for life. And you go and fuck that daughter and lose that 500 grand for the year. It's not that intelligent.
Yeah, I think he has a sort of relatable quality, and he is. Yeah, I want to say good with words. I don't mean he's good with words. He knows some good words, and that then makes people who really don't want to bother thinking. We've spoken about this before. Thinking deeply about things that are important to you is really hard, and it's not fun because you usually have to demolish half of the shit you believe. And Russell Brand has always seemed like people who don't want to do that think that they're still doing it because they're adopting. He makes his, for example, I think that, and I'm only half joking when I say this, but I think that like we had it right when we used to give communists the rope back in this country, and you know when I hear people talking about Marxism casually, it's like to my ear the same as them talking about Nazism casually. And so when I hear Russell Brand going, oh, well, we just need a little bit of redistribution and Marx had some right ideas, just imagine some ethnic cleansing and Hitler in the place of that. And that's what I'm hearing, and that's why I really don't like the fact he has a platform. As a person, he seems harmless enough and he seems okay, but it's his platform that makes me have an issue with him.
I can definitely understand your point of view on that, but even me myself, as staunch as what I am against Marxism, socialism, and communism in its totalitarian views in general, but even I would say that Marx had some, not very many, but some good ideas. But I do understand where you're actually coming from, though, to the point of he's saying, oh, we need to completely. The thing is with Russell Brand is that it doesn't matter what issue it is, whether it's drugs, whether it's to do with the way that society works or the way that society looks at women, even though he was one of the biggest womanizers ever, to the point where he had Katy Perry and yet he still went off and shagged somebody else. That's how neurotic that person is. But even though he has all of that and he's doing all of that, he still doesn't really know what the fuck he's talking about. Because he comes up with words that you think, oh, that's really intelligent. And then you actually listen to the words that he said, and the words that he uses is like me trying to use really big words in a sentence. Generally, I either get them wrong or I contradict myself or they're out of turn. Generally.
Well, there's. I don't want to sound like I'm flattering myself. I just mean that this is something I really do try and do, and I think I manage it, is if I'm using a big word, it's because it's the best word to use. I have quite a big vocabulary, and I try and not use overly complex language if I don't have to. I'll only use a big word if it's the best word. You know how some words might mean roughly the same thing, but they have different, well, connotations. There's a good way. Connotations is a better word than meaning, so there you go. And he does the opposite. He hides behind these big words.
Yeah.
And this is why I think that, for example, I remember Peter Hitchens absolutely destroyed him a few years ago in a Newsnight debate. And all the young trendies were like, hey, Russell Brand, you know, he's amazing. Hitchens doesn't know what he's talking about. It's like, look, it doesn't matter who was right or wrong in that situation. Brand couldn't actually articulate his own argument.
No.
And because he was hiding behind large words like a shield, and Hitchens knows all these words and identified that there was no argument behind them.
Yes,
and
he was
that's my
literally
problem
talking gobbledygook. Literally talking gobbledygook. It's just Russell Brand's just one of those people that blames everything on society, and then you pull him up on what he's done, and he goes, "Oh yeah, but that was in the past. You know, you can't be judged on what happens in the past." And then he'll talk about slavery.
You gotta love it, haven't you? You really do.
See, I like Russell Brand because I see him just as a comedy. I see him just as a comedian. He's literally, for me, in my opinion, he's literally just there to constantly contradict himself, to be that leftist that is so dogmatic on his ideology that he's forgotten what he literally said a minute ago. To the point of, yeah, well, you know, I think that criminals should never have to worry about all of their past and everything else like that. But the white man, when it comes to imperialism, and it's just, he's just a walking meme for me.
Really I mean, that's what I mean. Is if he was a mate, you would just chuckle at him and you know continue with your discussion, and you know that would be fine. You'd have a good night out. laughs would be had. But it's the fact that he's actually quite to my absolute bewilderment, quite an influential voice in our public discourse, and I'm like, this is not good. This is like having, okay, he seems harmless enough, but the ideas he's spouting are absolutely awful. It's like having a bomb inside a teddy bear. It's like, okay, it's fluffy and cuddly, but there's a fucking bomb in it, man.
Yeah.
And that's my issue with him. It's like, and there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, he's a good businessman in the sense that he knows how to market himself, but it's like he's marketing himself.
There's a lot of people behind Russell Brand. He even lets it hint on like his shows, especially on one of the videos that I done, that somebody's owning the video rights to what he actually does on YouTube itself. He always has somebody else that, see, for a communist or a socialist in the ideas of destroying capitalism, I always find that the biggest speakers and the biggest advocates are the ones that are using capitalism to their extent and their fulfillment and their fullest, to the point that I'm going to sell my speech for 500 grand. Not, I'm going to donate my speech to the charities for 500 grand. I'm going to keep that. And Russell Brand just embodies the fucking hypocritical left. That's why I've said that before. He is literally everything that you expect a leftist to do, and then how they act. And he embodies that to 100% every.
Yeah. And I think that because things are becoming a bit more dire in this country, people are starting to see through it, which is fine. But no, you're right, and that is a rule of the left almost, because you see the big capital estate types, and they'll philanthropically, well, as you say, donate a speech, and then you see the socialist types. But that's what they're like, because if you look at, the communists, they were never about, sharing the wealth. They were about making sure they were the only ones that could have wealth. So it makes perfect sense,
Oh, I've always had a question that always can never be answered, because I don't think that most leftists, especially socialists, are advocates for the means of production, and they're moaning the means of production. What happens when you end up either wanting to sell or retire your means of production? Can you sell it? Can you pass it on? Can you just leave and retire off of the goodness of your heart, sort of thing? What actually happens at the end when it comes to more people that want to buy into it? Does that mean that your share then goes down because more and more people want to come into work as you expand? What actually happens on that instance? It's fine saying, oh, everybody gets an equal share, but an equal share of 1% is still only fucking 1% of the business, where if you were just a worker, you might actually have an accumulation of something of around 5 to 6% in wages, for instance. Just because you have a percentage of what directly owns doesn't mean you're going to get more. And nobody ever has an answer for that, and I hate that.
Yeah.
You're not meant to actually think about things like that. You're only supposed to think about the things that make it sound good. And please put in air quotes when I said good.
Well, Jensen's right. It's all linguistic trickery. It's not meant to work. It was never designed to work. And it's like what you say, like 1% is always 1%. And God forbid if you have any success and the population grows, or worse still, people don't understand that if you run a business, if you run a business at cost, it's still losing money. Yes. Because the stuff you bought and the people you hired it's entropy. It's always aging, and it's always running out.
Yep.
So that factory, that mean of production, is degrading every minute, and it's becoming more and more obsolete. And then, if you have maybe 2 kids instead of 1, well, that's 2 more people who have needs that need to be met, and two each according to his need or whatever it is. So now we've got more needs, but the same amount of production.
Yep.
And it's just madness. But like the other thing is, and this is why I think it's really interesting that socialists and unions are a thing. Yeah. Because if everybody has an equal stake in the business, but say 4 or 5 people form a union, what they're effectively doing, usually, if that union has a leader, is going, look, we have 1% each, but we'd rather just do the work. Can you speak for our 5%, please? You, the one person. Yeah. Sure, man, that's fine. But then that person kind of controls 5%, not 1%.
Exactly. See, the things with communism and socialism, I've got 2 things that I want to go through. But the thing is with socialism and communism, when it comes to that aspect, especially with the union idea, why don't they just buy bonds or shares? And then they own direct pieces of capital. Why does it... What the hell was that?
That was me just gasping at your heresy.
Fair enough. But isn't that the same thing as having the means of production if you're buying into bonds or into actual shares?
I think so, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the second thing is, I mean, Owen MacDonald, I don't know if anybody knows who Owen MacDonald is, but he's a socialist from the UK, lives in Manchester. And he put up a video that is so ridiculous. I mean, it's not a long video, it's a short video, but I'll give you the premises of the title and see what you think of the actual title without even going into the video. The title is Personal Property versus Private Property.
Oh, I've heard this. Yeah, I've heard this shit before.
Yeah.
This is this was encapsulated in a meme, the toothbrush meme.
Yep. No, memes of destruction. I like Owen. I find him very funny, and he's a very personable person to speak to. The thing that I have with him is the case of when he does a video like that, it's all projection. It's all what he thinks. It's all dogma and rhetoric. There is when you try and have a conversation with him, you can't have a conversation. You have to have a debate. He has to write everything down. He has to be able to repurpose what you've said because he can't talk about his ideas structurally. He has to make sure that they're labeled and set. Otherwise, he loses his dogma. He loses his rhetoric. I've done this a couple of times with him, to be fair. But when it comes to the idea of personal property versus private property, they're exactly the same thing. Because if you say that you're going to have personal property that includes your house, your car, and whatnot, stuff like that, that's your clothes on your back and water and whatnot, then that means that you get that for free. So who's the ones that are actually losing their means of production to give it to you then? Which, again, when it comes to private property, which he believes is buying businesses, not anything to do with buying cars or buying other things, he thinks that is private property. They're one and the same thing. If you buy something that makes it yours, then it's yours. Personal property, by your definition, then, Owen, is not a case of it being yours. It's your family's, which means anybody can use it because it's not yours. It's your personal property, but it's not yours. I don't understand how people can go through that type of dogma and not see that.
Well, it's because they're constantly in attack mode, so they're just concentrating on their solution. And you see this even with relatively moderate people, and conservatives do as well. They'll have a solution, and the solution is completely unworkable. But they're like, yeah, but we just need to get rid of this thing first, and we can fix the solution once this horrible thing's out of them.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that I... Go on.
Yeah, you don't... You don't knock in your leaky roof unless you've got a tarpaulin to put over it. You know, like you don't do that. You have to have the solution ready to go before you get rid of the thing that's the problem. Otherwise, you just have a disarray.
Yeah.
And
I've asked Owen before because it's funny that you're going down that road. I've asked Owen before what type of system that he would have. And he would have a form of an archaic system, but only with the means of productions and small corporations that are being able to lead small areas of government. He believes in small tribalistic type of things. I've gone through this argument with him loads of times. Well, how do you trade with the rest of the world if the rest of the world is doing that? So say, for instance, you're up in Scotland and you have a couple of tribes or separations that are in England. How do you get to trade with Europe when you have to go through England to be able to do that? Now, say that you're at war with the people in England because they're on a separate tribe, because they want to do their own things, they have their own means of production. How does that help you? That doesn't help you. That's the reason why our society evolves the way it has done and has evolved in the way it has, because it's the best way for every human to be able to work out, to be able to make sure that it's the best thing for humanity in itself. You trade with me, I'll trade with you, you trade with that person, I'll trade with that person afterwards, rather than it going across of I'm my own little person and my own little utopia. I think people always disenfranchise themselves or distance themselves from the rest of the world and only have small aspects when it comes to socialism or communism. They don't think globally. They think very small. And I think that's the problem with it. That's the reason why it generally fails.
They do think small, but they don't. it's weird. They think small but abstract. So they think about their neighbour, the phrase, not the actual person they live next to. It's totally weird. They just live in this. It's basically a fantasy world from the get-go. And the other failure is the fact that sensible business people and conservatives don't stand up for. They're always appeasing. They don't try and stand up for their point of view, right? And I remember it was George Galloway was speaking, and this was back when I was blue-pilled, and he was giving a very sensible speech, to my mind, about how somebody was heckling him about how he was selling a book, and he was like, the heckler was like, "Oh, you're not going to give that away, George, you know? Why are you wanting money for it?" And then Galloway replies, "Well, because it's my work. My labour went into making this book, and I will get the reward from it."
Oh
like,
dear!
Yeah,
oh dear!
That's exactly right. That's completely sensible. That's how socialism should work. And the reason I found that appealing was because it's capitalism, and capitalism is fair. But they'd mislabeled everything.
Yep.
And that's how these guys operate.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we've gone off on a massive diatribe, which is my fault.
Really. One thing actually you could talk about this as well is the socialists and the I don't know, everybody else. It's the socialists that actually don't believe in humanity. Like, they're always talking about humanity as a blight or some kind of, human nature always fails, blah blah blah. Whereas it's the pro-free market, or at least the liberal people as well, that are always like, no, humans are by and large pretty all right, and we come up with good solutions. And in that vein, if you think humans are pretty ingenious, right? If we have just our personal property, right, and out of my personal property includes some junk that nobody has any value for, and I build a car because I'm clever, that thing is my personal property because it is made of junk. But a car is actually a huge game changer when it comes to distribution and production. So then it becomes something else. And what they do? They take it off me, or is it still my personal property?
No, they take it off you. It means the production needs to be a cooperative.
Well, exactly. But that's the thing, is like, so why would I build it? And how do they know how to run it? And that's the problem they always run into. They never think anything new will be made, and they think that all the old things will just stay the same.
Well, my problem is with socialism and communism in itself, in that aspect, for the humanistic approach, so to speak, is not always that issue. Because I do think that they come up with a decent point that some people would. It wouldn't be to the benefit of people themselves. Some people probably would. If we're being honest, some people probably would because they want to do it. But the thing where it comes down to communism and socialism in itself is, when it comes down to the humanistic nature, people are greedy. People always look after themselves. So if you build a society that is for everybody, people are going to use that for themselves to make themselves better, to make themselves more in power, to make sure that they have the power and the distribution. So all you're doing is creating small little monarchies with the people that are going to want to become leaders. And then you're going to have these oligarchs that are going to come back into play anyway, or these black marketeers that are going to be trying to racket people from different cooperatives. The thing is, that's human nature, and it's going to happen.
I maintain that that's always been the goal of socialism. Like, despite everything they say, if you look at how the early socialist communists types conducted themselves, they used their arguments about equity and all that pish to become manipulators of you look at Karl Marx tried to get successful socialist party members kicked out of the socialist party because they were eclipsing him.
Yep.
There's nothing. He didn't go, "Oh wow, this man's a socialist wet dream. Let's make him the poster boy." He didn't do that. He's like, "Oh shit, he's a threat to my supremacy in this group. I need him out." And that's what they've always been. He also
kicked people out for going full on communism before communism was a proper idea as well, because he was only sort of the founder of socialism. So when people went steps further, he kicked them out because they weren't under his ideology.
If you don't agree with me, you're going to have to leave. I don't want to play with you anymore.
That sounds like a story that we've got on for today. And that's from a conservative. I suppose with that, I suppose I should actually get on and actually do the story. But first
The
of all,
audience can tell that the three of us haven't been talking about politics this week because it just exploded everywhere there.
yeah, it kind of did, didn't it? It kind of did. Oh, so as you can all read from there, you've got the cock.
You're getting there.
I was getting there. I was getting there. I'm sure that there's going to be one put in my mouth at some point in time because of the way that I said cockle. But cockle chemo breakthrough could hold answers to curing cancer. Yep, you are hearing this correctly. It's actually a scientific paper. This is not actually an opinion piece. Scientists find cockle. I'll get there. It's a tongue twister, all right, for me. Cockle chemo could help cure leukemia, breast, lung, and colon cancers, especially in children. Very interesting. Surprising that this actually hasn't been produced more, to be fair.
Agreed.
So cockles are just as effective as some chemotherapy drugs in curing cancer, new researchers found. Sugars found in the small shellfish were approximately as effective, and that's a direct quotation as well, mind you, as cancer drugs, biomedical scientists at the University of Salford in Manchester found. So cockle chemo, as they called the process, which I wish they didn't, could be particularly suitable for children because it's less toxic and less like healthy side effects, they said. Yeah, you might get a little bit selfish, but you'd be fine. It's a lot better than obviously chemo and losing your hair and bone density and everything else like that. So why is it taking this long? Question on that one. The results were published in the Marine Drugs Journal after the scientists tested the mollusk's sugar with positive results against leukemia, breast, lung, colon cancer cells, and tumors. Lead researcher David Pye, director of child cancer research charity Kids Can, said, "I have no fucking idea." So sugars delivered from mammals. Sorry?
Polysaccharids.
Yep, that one, polysaccharids. Delivered from mammals have long been a source of experimentation by cancer scientists, but to date with inconclusive results. And obviously, this is a direct quotation that's coming up. Certain applications have actually helped the cancer grow. We opted to look at shellfish instead, not least because they are much cheaper and easier to source. And, you know, the EU is going to be cunts and withdraw all of our medical supplies, apparently. Sorry, different story. And, well, as being rich in sugars, let's move down so everybody can read with me. They have a different structure from which we are starting to derive a number of potential drugs, which, with further refinement, have the potential to work alongside more traditional treatments. Surely this should be called a traditional treatment rather than the actual chemotherapy drugs, which is radiation. Wouldn't this be technically a form of what's it called? Pathology or something, whatever it's called. Basically, home remedies.
Apothecary.
I think the processing that the drug would have to go through would negate that.
No, I'm not saying it wouldn't, but I would presume that it's still a form of home remedy, I would have thought, isn't it? Not saying that you can go out and buy fucking shellfish and be able to cure cancer by yourself, because you're not going to fucking know what to do and you're not going to get the right sugars. I'm just saying that surely that would be classified as more of a traditional medicine than what radiation would be.
It's a sloppy use of language. I see what you mean.
Yeah. But then again, I suppose it depends in the context of what you would call traditional. Traditional could also just mean what we would normally use.
Yeah, I think that's what they mean. But traditional medicine is indeed used as a get-out clause for herbal medicine.
Yeah.
Because it might not be herbal, it might have something else in it.
Everybody wants herbs.
The herb.
Yerb. He added that extracting the sugars from the cockles was a simple procedure, and he was encouraged by the impact on tumors. Kids can, said 2 to 3, let me be clear on that one, said 2 to 3 of every British child with cancer will not survive into adulthood, which I actually remember it probably around about 10 years ago, where it was 1 in 3 or 1 in 5 at one aspect. I remember it being a lot wider being younger. Not because I don't think that it's a case of, cancer wasn't as highly or as deadly, but because we didn't know it. But I've always found it interesting how the gap got smaller and smaller. I just found it interesting.
One of the interesting things with cancer treatment is they're waking up more and more to the fact that cancer is just an umbrella term, and that one type of cancer only has the label in common with another kind of cancer. Like, they just behave completely differently.
Yeah, the behaviours are completely different. One can be aggressive, one can be stagnant, one can attack one set of organs, one can attack the blood cells, one can attack the bone marrow, so on and so forth. Yeah. Dr. Pie, added, what is really significant about this is not so much the seafood source, but the fact that sugars of this chemical structure work effectively at tolerable levels for children, which surely means that if you could make synthetic versions of the sugar as well, wouldn't that also stop the worry about overfishing, so to speak, for getting the drug, and also be able to directly affect the children and help them?
Cockles would be really easy to just grow in a lab and grind down, I guess.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, but you could also just do it as the pure... you could also do it as a synthetic sugar as well.
Yeah. Although, I don't know, like it would depend on the chemical structure of it, but I think it would be easy enough that you could just do it naturally. If you got like an aircraft hangar and just filled it with like tanks of water and cockles, you could easily do that.
Yeah, especially in fucking hospitals and things like that. You can get them in your own tanks and everything else like that. I suppose it would be, it'd definitely be cheaper than going to the EU to get our medicine, wouldn't it?
Plus, of course, depending on how much of the cockle they use, you can always eat the damn things afterwards.
True. No, that's very, very true. Yeah.
Just thinking,
There is a side effect with this drug, which is you just, like, for 2 weeks after it, you just hear the sound of the ocean.
Oh dear. Oh dear. I suppose at least it's not a winkle.
There's just so many bad jokes could be made. I think we should at least try to attempt to be serious with some of this. This is
especially considering that it is actually a really good breakthrough as well. And I know that we're trying. Well, we haven't been together for quite a while, so we're having a bit of a laugh and as a joke. But really, this is a massive breakthrough. If this is what it says it is, and it's actually helping as much as chemotherapy already is helping in certain aspects, or the drugs of chemotherapy, then that's already going to be a massive step in front, which means that you can actually attack it more than what you would be able to with the chemotherapy drugs. Because obviously you have to do 2 months on, 2 months off, 2 months on, 2 months off. With something like this, you can continue the drugs or continue the treatment for a prolonged period of time. Because all it is just taking the sugars out. So to speak,
and you're not killing half your body at the same time. Like,
exactly.
If you think about it, this is when they say it's as effective at fighting the cancer, that actually might be even more effective in a live human, because it's one thing to have the chemotherapy and try and fight off the cancer, but the chemotherapy is doing as good a job of killing you as the cancer is, and you're just hoping that the cancer dies first. Whereas with this thing, it's doing the same thing as the chemo is, but your immune system will actually start to get better, and you'll be healthier and you'll be happier, so it probably, if you tallied it all up, is maybe, or maybe they already have, right enough, but maybe it's far more effective than chemo.
Well, that's the thing. This has only literally just been discovered. So if it's already as effective with only simple procedures of extracting the sugars and interacting the sugars with the cells themselves and stopping the division of the cancer cells, so to speak, then that's already a major step up from what using radiation pills to do exactly the same thing. And it can also be targeted as well. Because obviously with a pill, you're going to have to swallow it. You can't, or deposit it. With this, you don't have to. You can technically inject it straight into where the area needs to go. It's a sugar base. It goes straight into the blood.
I'd be interested to know what kind of tests they've done, though, because, like, if it's just with laboratory tests, then, you know, like, I could put battery acid on a cancer cell and go, oh, look, battery acid, look, it just destroys the cancer cell. Poof, gone. You don't want to be drinking battery acid. So
No.
I need to know more about the sort of tests they're doing, but it's certainly a nice idea.
So from what I can gather from reading it, they're not interacting the sugars with anything else. It seems that they're just using the sugars that are being extracted from the seashells or from the shellfish. Sorry. So for me, that's a hell of a lot better. Hell of a lot better. Regardless of how the tests are, if it's just sugars going into your body, the worst that can happen is an epileptic shock, so to speak, which can still be monitored by insulin anyway. So if the thing is that the sugars are too high for the body to go through, then the only thing that you need to do is counteract it with a shot of insulin. I mean, I know there's simplistic terms that we're going through. After all, we're not microbiologists or doctors, but from our limited understanding, that the solution seemed pretty easy.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too... Sugar is probably an oversimplification of what it actually is, but because that's more to do.
Natural sugar. It does say natural sugars from the shellfish.
Yeah, but it's not like you get lots of different types of sugars. That some of them are even enzymes, or are they catalysts for enzymes? Anyway,
They would be catalysts for enzymes. Sugars would be catalysts for enzymes.
Yeah. So, for example, there's a thing that your brain produces called peptides, which are sugars, but you couldn't put them in anything, and like they don't behave like normal sugars. What they do is they make the phospholipids and the glial somethings in your body grow exponentially, and so it doesn't really have the effect of making, like, say you were to drink some of this peptide stuff, you wouldn't get an energy boost, and it wouldn't make you digest the stuff faster or anything like that. So it's difficult to say what they mean by sugar, but I mean, so I don't think I know of any sugars that are like harmful to like toxic to the body just from an injection or whatever. So it sounds really promising. Although equally, you know, like with the political side of this is the thing. This is why it's important to know your politics, because with the political side of this, it's one thing for the scientists to discover something. It's entirely another for that cure to ever see the light of day.
Yep, agreed.
Or to see the light of day in this country, because the thing is, we know that the NHS, rather than let people say buy a drug of their own choice, they'll just ban it. So like, if the NHS won't provide it because it's too expensive, you don't have the option of saying, oh well, I'll pay for it. Like, they just ban it. NICE usually ban it, not the NHS. So it worries me, because it's like, there's a cure for diabetes they discovered using stem cell treatments a few years ago in Japan, and that just got destroyed because some massive drug company patented the treatment, even though the treatment's using it uses the body's own chemicals, so it's not a drug.
Yeah.
And so what they effectively did was they patented a natural process in the body, which is like astonishing.
Yeah.
And then people go, "Oh my God, the corporations are evil." I'm like, no. The corporations don't enforce the patents; the government do.
Yes.
And so, you know, when they find these treatments, it always worries me, because I think, you know, you can see this bright, shiny future, and then you see this looming cloud coming in front of it a lot of the time.
Yeah. To be fair, that's the pattern of fucking China, though, isn't it? I mean, the story for another day, but the way that they pattern, destroy, and cut away from everything's fucking ridiculous anyway. The EU's turning more authoritarian every fucking day. Or more like China, should we say. China!
So that's my thing. And then the fact is that with these things, if they do that, it becomes available only to rich people, which it's fine. If you're rich and you can afford to buy something, of course you should make full use of it. But the thing is that when that happens, it becomes exclusive. And when it becomes exclusive and not widely used, the price doesn't seem to go down for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
I was telling somebody about... my view on the NHS is that we should privatise quite a considerable amount of it. And
I think around about half. I think that we should be able to privatise around about half of the NHS, and then we should let the socialist or social side of the NHS compete with the private side and let them battle between themselves. The competition in itself would make both hospitals or section of hospitals better anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, I don't know what percentage I would put on it, but 50% or more, like, quite a devastating chunk. And people were like, "Oh, but the price of drugs, nobody would be able to afford medications," and I'm like, no, that's just simply not true, because the thing is, paracetamol, aspirin, and ibuprofen are cheaper than sweeties.
Yep. You can buy
Why
a fucking aspirin for 36p, 38p.
And the reason for that is because when these drugs were come up with, it was too early for anybody to patent them before hundreds and hundreds of people had their own formulas.
Yep.
And that's why they've remained so cheap.
Yep.
And so if you were to have a situation where, cockle cancer cell, magic miracle cure was available in fucking Asda and nobody could say that they were the only ones allowed to produce it, everybody would be buying it and it would become so cheap that so that's how these things work. But because this like insidious way of running the medical industries around the world, it's just as bad in America but for different reasons. Because of that happening, people are duped into thinking that these drugs are really expensive when they're really not. Like, it doesn't cost much to produce most drugs, unless they're very high-end things like anti-epileptics and stuff.
Yeah, for America and places like that, it's not even the hospitals that make the actual drugs expensive. It's not even the government that makes the drugs expensive or the procedures expensive. It's the fucking insurance companies that make it expensive because they know that they're directly responsible for what's going on. That if you were to go to a particular GP or something like that and you wanted something done, you could literally buy a procedure for like 100, 200 to 400 quid or even $1,000 to have an operation. You go through your insurance company and you're paying something stupid like £2,000 for the £100 fucking operation or situation. It's ridiculous when you commoditize something and it's solely for one aspect and for one purpose. You give sole responsibility to that one entity, and that's how corporatism happens. When they know that they have a monopoly over it, and as soon as they have a monopoly over it, everybody has to come to them. Which means that whatever price they charge, everybody else has to pay. So
I was talking to an American about that, and he was outlining how this works because we didn't fall out or anything. He'd been coming at it from the angle of I was complaining about the NHS setup, and he was complaining about the American setup, saying that it's even worse or whatever. And I said, well, actually, what you've got is you've actually got the same result from two completely different systems, because he's saying people don't go to the doctor because they can't afford to, so they don't get treated.
Yeah,
fair enough. They don't get the treatment. That's the end result, because they get to keep their money. So what I mean, they're not worse off, but their health suffers. Now, it's the same thing with the NHS, because the GP is not a health provider, and the A&E is not a health provider. They are a gatekeeper to treatment. And if the GP says you're not ill, you're not fucking ill, and there's not a thing anyone in the country can do about it, because your GP is your GP, and unless you move house, they will stay your GP, and they decide whether you're ill or not, and what treatments you'll get, if any. And if they say no, the answer's no. So again, you're no worse off financially, but you don't get your treatment, just like the Americans. Two completely different systems, same result.
Yeah.
And that's what I worry about with this drug, and these sorts of cancer stuff. I mean, I don't know if it ever came about. Did you ever hear about that?
Do you know what I really want to point out about this? Is that people that might read about this from across seas or from Europe or from other places will go, oh, that means that the NHS is still getting people to be able to work and to fund it, and the national system works. No, not at all. This was done from a university in Salford. That means that it was privatized and also it was sanctioned and funded privately.
Yep.
That's where innovation happens. When you're looking for innovation and forcing more ways of being able to get money and funding. Not from when you're just going to go, we're going to get 60 grand this year, it's fine, we don't have to worry.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing with all of this is that I've got to say that I don't think that when people say, you know, oh, healthcare is a human right, I don't like that way of putting it. And I think what they're maybe trying, or what they would be better saying, is that it should be a public trust, if that's the right word. So, in the way that, you know, like a phone company is not allowed to throttle your phone signal based on who you are or what your address is or what your political leanings are. They're not allowed because it's a public amenity. And I think that healthcare should be considered in much the same way. So it should be private, but it should be a case of you could easily put very hands-off laws in place that stopped preferential treatment or whatever like that people are worried about. Yeah. And I genuinely believe the price of things would fall, and then taxes would be lowered because we wouldn't be paying for the NHS, so you'd have more money. But people are too scared to take the leap. They don't know anything else.
Yeah, no, I'd have to agree with you on that. I mean, there's certain things that we would need to hash out and everything else like that. But then again, we're not going to fucking change anything anyway. So if we're not going to change anything, let's have a moan and a rant about what's going on in the EU and preferably what's going on with Hungary.
Well, it's worth doing as well, though, because, I mean, if you're saying, oh, we should do this with the NHS, and then I have another suggestion, you're like, well, that's fucking stupid, and here's why, then we're teaching each other how to think a bit more tightly, so it's still worth thinking about.
No, I definitely agree with you, and I think that's one thing that is... No, I definitely agree with you, and I think that's one thing that's lost in our political compasses nowadays, is simply that we're so set and so divided by our ideologies and identities of what we think and what we feel and who we hang around with and what that's supposed to entail, that we lose the facts and the positions of we need to talk about our ideas to hash out the problems with my ideas and to hash out the problems of your ideas and realize that they're coming from a similar position, and why don't we implement both at the same time, or aspirations of both of them, implement them both together. That's how democracy is supposed to work. Arguments are coming from your position, but talking about it in a responsible way to be able to realize that there's mistakes from it. Because one doesn't learn from one's mistakes if they're not told about them.
Yeah, and I think even as well from for the purposes of you doing this show and me doing my videos and stuff, is like, I think people appreciate the honesty. Like, if the BBC were to run this story, you wouldn't have a fucking clue what the news anchor was thinking, what the reporter was thinking, what any of the people that they interviewed were thinking. Whereas we're just like, well, here's my genuine take. And it's the same. They get to hear a news-ish program. I don't know if we qualify, but they get to hear current events, and they get to hear it honestly from human beings. And I think, you know, I hope that is of entertainment and stuff to people.
Oh yeah, no, I'd definitely say that we're probably an opinion rag. I would say that we're an equivalency as that. We're an opinion rag, to be fair. We look at stories and we give our opinions on the stories with some facts and some evidence generally, but that's what we're here to do. I mean, that's what people want to hear, though. They want genuine opinions. It's like, for me, Hungary to challenge EU Parliament ruling reports. The Hungarian Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, has vowed to challenge last week's ruling by the European Parliament at the European Court, the country's national news agency reported on Monday. And this is a direct quote. We will not give up our rights to defend our border. I think that's what he was trying to say. No one can take a iota of that away from us, he said during a speech in Parliament in Budapest. The statement was made after two-thirds, remember on this one, of the EU Parliament last week voted in favour of triggering Article 7 against Hungary, calling its new legislation concerning and domestic media and opposition to EU immigration policies to threat a democracy. So because Hungary has come out and said that they are changing some policies, as in they got rid of some of their old school judges and put some new ones in. And they've also said that they're not going to take in any immigrants or anything else like that at this moment in time. And they want to make sure that they have direct democracy from their own people. That's a threat to the EU's democracy, apparently.
Isn't EU... Sorry, go ahead, Jensen.
Well, of course it is. By making your own country the more important thing, you're not sticking with the whole unit that is the European Union. You're not following their rules, which makes you the enemy. So that's why they're going to try and punish them as much as they can.
Yep, and they're not just doing it with Hungary and Poland. They're also trying to go after Italy. They're also trying to go after the Czech Republic. They're also trying to go after Holland. They will go after Austria if Austria changes to the right next year. Remember that a lot of countries are having elections next year, and some of them are very big. It will be quite interesting next year.
Yeah, I think our education system and probably the EU propaganda system as well, they kind of make us think that the EU and Europe itself consists of France, Italy, Spain, Germany, and that's pretty much it. But it's like, nah, you've got places like Austria and like Hungary that have been very fucking influential in world history. And these are people that you don't just get to kick over and walk away. Like, particularly the Austrians. And then even the Dutch practically invented capitalism as a system, you know, like they invented the stock market, they invented the East India Trading Company, and unbelievable stuff. You don't just get to step on those people and nothing happens. And the EU are stupid to think so.
Very much so. I think the stupidity of the EU itself is self-explanatory. They're trying to quash their idea of populist by calling it far-right parties or they're racist or Nazi parties or whatever. They're having some dogma and rhetoric thrown around to try and discredit these type of countries that are coming forth. But the thing is, they have to remember that the countries have already voted for them to be in power. It's not a case of they just come out of the blue and gone, right, well, we've taken over, so now we're holding our country hostage and it's our ideas against you. No, the country fucking voted for it. The country voted for them to become this populist movement. That's what populist movement means. It means doing what the people want. That's the whole purpose of what a populist definition is for politics anyway.
Which, incidentally, is pretty much what democracy is.
So to speak, yeah.
This is the thing. If you don't like populism, you should be a Republican, not a Democrat. And I don't mean the American party system. I mean constitutionally speaking.
Yeah. Well, that's fair enough. But just going back to the story, because I could go on to the whole fucking thing of the EU for all night, and we're already halfway through the show, and we've only done one story, so we kind of need to move.
We need to get to number 3.
Oh, no, I'm more interested in number 5, to be fair. Right. Oban has also denounced the proposed EU measures to deploy, a 10,000-strong force to guard the borders of the bloc, obviously the Eastern Bloc for people that don't understand what that is, stressing that each country has a right to defend its own territory. So let's just read that again so we actually understand that. Oban has also denounced the proposed EU measures to deploy a 10,000-strong force to guard the borders of the bloc, stressing that each country has the right to defend its own territory. In other words, saying to the EU, fuck off, we'll look after ourselves. Because we trust ourselves to look after ourselves properly. You were going to say something, Jensen?
To be honest, all I was going to say is that, and this is the major reason why the EU as a governmental organisation doesn't like the little countries opening their mouth and saying no to them. They don't like the loss of control that this will cause. And more to the point, they don't like the fact that other countries out there are going to go, Well, actually, we agree with Hungary, and the EU are taking the piss, which is going to incite all manner of problems for them. And let's be honest, EU knows it's teetering on a bloody knife's edge as it is.
It is. It really, really fucking is. More and
Yeah,
more
and let's not
countries.
forget the EU. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, mate. You go ahead. I'm all right.
The EU is just an entity of, say, like in the tens of thousands of people. It's not the countries. The countries are the countries of millions of people. And if the EU think that they have enough resources and talent, and I assure you that they don't have the talent, to keep plugging these leaks everywhere, they don't. They're going to burn themselves out, which is fine by me, because the French are sick of the EU, because, okay, they get their, their special holidays and shit that we pay for, but they also pay back in other things, like kind of like what we do. We get money for our universities, but we have to give away our fisheries policy, and the French have to make stupid compromises like that too, as do the Germans. And all the people that actually live in the EU are sick of the EU, and the EU itself is not Europe. It is an organization. It is a mafia of a few 10,000 bureaucrats, and they are the ones that make the decision for themselves.
I completely and utterly agree with that statement. I have nothing else to add to that.
Could I just say one more thing as well? It's quite funny that people don't like this. Because if you ever say, oh, we should, abolish the state, the first thing a lefty or a righty will say to you is, oh, but who will defend the borders? But then when it comes to talking about defending the borders, they're all like, oh, you can't do that.
I actually completely and utterly agree with that statement, especially when it comes to people that don't even want a nation. Which I find this argument completely and utterly ridiculous. So you've got people that don't want to be nationalistic, but they want to be continentalist. I don't understand that process. So you would not say that you're English, you wouldn't say that you're Scottish, you wouldn't say that you're from the United Kingdom, but you'd say that you're European. You'd be proud of being somebody from European. So all you're doing is completely and utterly negating where you live and the processes that you get from where you live, and saying that everything comes from the continent of Europe. You are so far removed from the countries that you are living in that you don't even realize that the countries and nations that you are in are the actual ones that are looking after you, not the fucking EU.
Yep. The EU is two buildings, one in Brussels and one in Strasbourg, and that's what the EU is. The EU is not the whole of Germany, the whole of France, etc. And I think they're waking up to that fact very slowly, and they're in denial about it, but they're becoming aware of it.
My dad, I'll tell you a quick anecdotal story. My dad was saying, the EU must be coming around because you've got Angela Merkel and you've got a couple of others that are now complaining to the EU that they want to get a deal on everything. I said to my dad, did you realize that Angela Merkel and all the rest of the actual elected leaders around the EU are not actually part of the EU? They're just one member state. They just get one vote. That's it. They don't get to decide what's going on. They don't have any sort of big party or big play that's going on. That's it. They're just the leaders of a democratically elected country that goes into the EU to try and help the best of their country. But if they're on their own, and there's nothing that they can do about it. They are a separate entity. The EU only works if you are in agreement. If you are not in an agreement, then you are on your own. That's not a democracy.
It is a cartel.
Pretty much, yes. Right, let's get on with this little bit. As I said, otherwise we will be on here all fucking night long. I could do it, but I don't want to. Hungarian government opposed the EU migration policy for a long time. In July, Budapest withdrew from a UN global agreement on standard ways for countries to address migration-related issues, citing security concerns as the reason for leaving the recently agreed pact. So, just for people that didn't understand the language and that, which is probably not that many, but just humor me. Basically, Hungary withdrew from the UN's deal that they had with them, or a pact that they had with them, because they were citing security concerns, because they didn't want to let illegal immigration into their country because they weren't sure if terrorists were going to be involved or in in around the people that were coming in. So for that reason, and citing security concerns for their own citizens, the EU went, shut up and take them anyway. Just so people understand.
And you cannot blame Hungary, because their concerns are exactly what ISIS actually fucking bragged about, of the Trojan horse. Yes. And the thing is that Hungary can maybe go, yeah, okay, we'll take a few migrants at the border, bring them in, put them in camps or council states, whatever. But it's a completely different story when these people go to Germany first, are approved by policies that the Hungarians don't know what those policies are, if any, or who these people are, and then they get the free movement thing, and they get to come down to Hungary for whatever reason. That's a completely different story.
See, I've always found this really interesting from the left. If you give the left an inch, they'll take a yard, and if they give it a yard, they'll take a mile, so on and so forth. And if you say to the left, okay, we'll take refugees in. That's it, we'll take refugees in. As soon as you say that you're going to do that, and then you say, well, refugees are only allowed to go to the first port of call. So say, for instance, all of the, like Croatia, them type of places, Italy, Cyprus, all those type of Sicily, Spain, all those type of places that are on the Mediterranean. They would be first port of call for most of the refugees, so to speak. But as soon as they get into the country, they become Europeans by definition of freedom of movement.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that they can then travel anywhere that they want, which means that you then have unvetted immigration going around everywhere, which means that you can no longer then census for what's going on in your own country. Some leftists have said, well, why don't you just make all of them citizens? But then that means that the people that are already citizens and the problems that we already have, as in some places high unemployment or very high youth unemployment, for instance, in Spain, Greece, Turkey and other places like that, even though Turkey's not EU, but you know what I mean. And you have all of those problems, and they're only going to exacerbate them more with unvetted migration coming in, or even vetted migration coming in at a mass amount. But, you know, logic doesn't really help these type of people because they're so interested in helping these refugees, I say that tongue-in-cheek, from coming in and actually trying to make a better life for themselves. And if that's the actual process, and generally that's what the language that the left uses, they're not refugees. They're economical migrants or migrants.
Yeah, and it's that thing again of them only dealing in the abstract. So they don't know what a refugee is. They don't know what they look like. They've never met one. They don't, you know,
they don't
plan on inviting one into their house.
See, I disagree with you there. They do know what a refugee is, and the reason why they do is because they make sure that they conflate what a refugee is. That's why the language purposely changes.
All right, yeah, of course, yeah, but I just mean that they don't mean a refugee like a real person in front of them. They mean the idea of a refugee.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. This is why the right have this issue for me and the left don't. Because if the right, let's take the extreme right, not like fascists and shit, but like the extreme right, and they say, no, we want zero immigration. None. Not a bit. I think, right, what's the worst that could possibly happen from that?
Yeah.
Nothing. Okay, what's the worst that could possibly happen from the left's policy? I don't have enough time tonight to tell you what could go wrong. So let's just err on the side of caution and listen to what the right have to say on this issue, because they and this is what I mean, because if the left actually cared about real people, they would say, oh, but the worst that could happen is that, you know, Amir here will have to go back to a war zone. It's like, okay, but Bob that lives next door to you and has no legs and isn't getting any treatment on the NHS because they can't afford it, he's fucked now.
Yeah.
So how much do you care about Bob, and why does Amir get your sympathy more than Bob?
Because Amir is somebody that is beneath a white person and needs the help to get out. That's why generally the left's policies are always racist, because they always assert and always have to assert that races that are not white are beneath white people and need the leg up, so we need to help them, thinking that they're not good enough to be able to do it by themselves.
Yeah, and this baffles me as well. Like, the left are so bad with categories.
Yes.
Like, they can't go, right, okay, this is the country and this is how we categorize the nationals of the country. Like, they can't do that, which is why when they do try and do categories, so they go, okay, minorities. I'm like, that's not a category. You know what I mean? Like, that's a word for an idea. That's not a category that means anything. And this is the thing is, Mr. Migrant Refugee person that needs our help, he's a romanticized idea.
Yes.
He's not an actual flesh and blood person who's going to come and, decapitate your daughter. Whereas the person that they have to walk past in the street who's begging, they won't look at him because he's a real person, but they love the poor as an abstract. It's
Yep.
I'm seeing this more and more, and it's quite sickening when you think about it.
See, I always love the fact that when the left say, "Oh, we're fighting for the working class," and then you have a white working class man come up and say, "Yeah, but I don't want you to. This is what I want, and you're fighting for something that I don't want." They look at the white man that's probably really impoverished, that probably doesn't have anywhere really to live, that's just about making ends meet, so to speak, and go, "But you're white, you're privileged. We're not fighting for you. We're actually fighting for Amir or Buka that's behind you. You're not the working class we mean. You're not the right type of working class." And that's why so many people on the left will go, "Well, we're trying to help these people." It's like, you're not trying to help anybody. You're trying to make yourself feel better because you think that you have a guilt complex because if you think something happened in the past, so you have to make things better. The thing is, nobody was even alive when these things happened, but yet you still have a guilt complex because of it. And I hate that about the left.
And it's almost always a personal problem. Not always, but almost always. Like, it's, daddy issues or something like that, and it manifests itself as, let's bring on all the immigrants in. It's something like that, because generally, if people have got their shit together, they focus on what's in front of them and they deal with it. Whereas these lefty types, who I have to deal with them more than I'd like to on Twitter and shit like that, because they've invaded all the hobbies I have. They just scream about these non-issues, make them issues, attack and try and destroy the lives of anybody who contradicts them. And you're like, you are actually properly mentally ill, and you've turned that into policy.
Yes.
You've not got a clue how to run your own life, and you're trying to tell me how to reorganize the reparations to the victims of slavery or whatever. Get out.
Yes. Yep.
Clean up your room, get your act together.
Yeah. I mean, Jordan Peterson, the means of destruction, would be screaming that at this moment in time. Make sure you clean your room before you try and change the world. Which, to be fair, is true. Basically, make sure that your own affairs are correct before you try and take on the rest of the world. Because if your own affairs are not correct, how the hell can you think that you're going to change the rest of the world?
It fucking works, by the way, might I add.
It does. It does. Because once that you're settled and you're happy in yourself and you know what you're talking about and what you're doing, life seems easier. It's easier to comprehend. It's easier to do.
Absolutely. And even if you can't do it, right? This is the thing, because it fucking works, right? Redistributing the means of production and, rounding up the kulaks and deciding who's guilty, that doesn't work, right? Tell you what does work is sorting out your shit that's in front of your face, and then if you can't sort it out, like cleaning your room, and you can't clean it for whatever reason, and you ask yourself why you can't deal with that problem, then you've got an answer and you can go and work on that. So, like, maybe you need a bigger house, maybe you need more money, so that means you need to change job. Like, it works, it really works, and you just build up from there, and it fucking works.
It does. It's a simple mentality, as in instead of looking at every single problem and trying to take every single problem on at once, pick a problem, deal with it one by one. And once you start tackling problems one by one, the problems don't seem as big, they don't seem as never-ending, and you can actually deal with the problems when they're one by one. Because once you deal with one, another problem can go away. Oh, I've got a problem with my car, so I can't get it to the appointment. Oh, my car's now fixed, I can get to my appointment.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like, to briefly, I know you want to move on with these stories, so I won't take too long, but to briefly go into something about with the comics thing, what these people have been doing reflects in art as well, right? Because they take these comics and they destroy them, and then they completely reconstruct reconstruct them in the name of representation or what have you, right? And because it's got to be a message piece to help the disenfranchised or whatever horseshit rationalization they've got this week, right? That's what they do. Now, taking the attitude that we've just described, I've not tried to do anything like that, but what I've done is I've actually made comics for charity in my local area. So I've not gone and tried to make like a Marxist Captain America to sell to millions of people and overthrow the government. What I've done is there was a guy who wanted to make a comic for a charity, needed a writer, I went and did that for him. Just from a local small press thing. So like that's the sort of, even in your specialist nerd fields or whatever, you know, everybody will have their own vocations and things like that. It works. You can apply this to anything.
Yeah. As University Challenge would say, what's your specialist field in today? And mine would be Dragon Ball Z and Naruto. Yeah, well, that's what it would be. But no, you do make a great point that it is very simple to be able to look at a chaotic mess and then think, well, what the fuck, everything's fucked up. But as soon as you start looking at that chaotic mess and going, okay, well, let's take this small problem and start doing it one by one, it's amazing how quickly you can sort out the chaos. And no, you're not going to be able to sort out everything that's chaotic. You're not going to be able to sort everything out so it looks perfect. That's just not the way that life is. But if you can pick up a problem one by one and focus on the problem one by one, it gets done. Rather than looking at all the problems and going, well, fuck it, what's the point? As soon as you start getting stuck in, you can actually get things done. I think that's where a lot of people nowadays go wrong.
And yeah, and to an extent, you know, to not be entirely unfair, people have problems. They have, you know, the country's a bit shit in regards to education and health. And if you're not well educated and you're unhealthy and you're stressed, you will grasp at the answers that seem most appealing and effective, and you will want to just, you know, if you're being told by the education system, as they always are, telling you, oh yeah, you're going to be the next generation of Martin Luther Kings and you're going to go out and change the world, and that's what you aim for, you're not going to manage it very well because that's not a realistic goal. What they should be telling you is the sorts of stuff we've just described, and it, you know, it takes fucking years to get back from there. And as a continual theme with our discussions, a lot of getting back from there involves looking at yourself and going, well, I need rid of this, and I need rid of this, and I like that about myself, but I need rid of that too. And you know what I mean? It's not nice. It's not a nice process, and people just cannot do it.
Sure. No, I completely agree. It's all like there's a menace and aggression during a new EDL demo.
There's a nice little segue there.
I'm not sure it was nice. It seemed kind of forced, but a problem at a time is a problem solved. So the Democratic Football Lads Alliance shares many similarities with the EDL, apparently, founded by Tommy Robinson almost a decade ago. Apparently. But let's get into this. It'll be interesting. So, by Andy Hughes, specialist producer, people are calling them the new DL. No, you're calling them the new EDL. Nobody else is. Nobody else on the street is calling them the new EDL. Just you, the media. But there are many similarities between the Democratic Football Lads Alliance, the DFL, and the group founded by Tommy Robinson in 2009. Both the EDL and DFLA, which almost sounds like the DVLA, but I digress, were formally formed to fight Islamic extremism. Actually, you go on to actually say this very later. It's not against Islamic extremism, the DFL. The DFL is actually a Pacific movement that's actually done by football hooligans around the whole of the UK. And expats, ex-military services, and actually other people from other faiths as well, that are directly responding to girls that are being raped and groomed by a particular section of people. That's what that response was. It's nothing to do with Islamic extremism. It's to do with grooming from particular people that are from Islam. There is a fucking difference.
Yes, and let's refer people to Jack Straw, of all people, who's hardly an extremist, when he says that the tiny number of that demographic committing almost all of the abuse is not something you can hand wave away with, some white people are pedos as well.
Yeah, there's something,
because the majority of crime is committed by the minority within a minority.
Yeah,
so you've got
especially
Muslims
when
as a minority, and then you've got these Muslims within that. It's like a minority inside a minority, so it's not something that's difficult to identify.
Yeah, especially if you have something like 7 to 8% of the population is Asian or classifies themselves as Asian Muslims, and then you have to half that, so then you've got 3.5 to 4% of that population that might be invested or entwined in doing this. So you half it again, and you've got 2% of an Asian population or Muslim population that probably has done this, but yet is around about 86 to 87% of the perpetrators that have done this, that have done the grooming gangs.
Mm-hmm.
That's a ridiculous percentage. Ridiculous amount of a percentage. And if you want to know where I got statistics from, it's from Carillion, the government think tank. So you can get the statistics from there for that. In actual fact, they actually went out to disprove the fact that it was just Asian men. They were sorely mistaken when they come back and actually were saying that it was well over what they thought it was.
Yep. And this troubles me as well, right? This troubles me because we have what could well be fucking football hooligans going out battering the shit out of people that we don't know because there's no investigation. Are they pedos or not? We don't know because the investigation hasn't been had. So the question then arises, well, why are they doing that? And the question the left and the establishment and even a lot of the right-wing people come up with is, they're just racists and bored.
Yeah.
Like, actually, no. What's happened is there's an epidemic level. What is it? What did you say in your video? 1 million girls?
Oh, it's
know about?
It's very close to 1 million girls that are from all over the country. Yeah.
So 1 million that we know about in the last 15 years alone. So that's a fifth of the Scottish population. To put that in perspective, have had this happen to them. No police investigations, no high court cases, no public inquiries, no government task forces. That's why this is happening. The system has abysmally let these girls down in the first place. Then it's let them down again by letting crime happen to them. Then it's let them down a further time by covering up that crime. And people are absolutely desperate with the compassion that these liberal lefty types say is to be prized, which it is. Compassion's a good thing.
Definitely.
You can't hear about this happening and not get angry about it. So now you've got this situation which really worries me of these people. I don't know who the fuck they are. I wouldn't like to be on the wrong side of them either. Going out and doing God knows what to God knows who for God knows what the reasons are. But it's the best we've got. It's the best we've got to deal with this problem.
Well, the thing that I really dislike about everything that's going on with the grooming gangs and everything else of that, and so many people say, "Oh, but it's over." It's like, no, it really ain't. It's still going on. Even in Rotherham, they're still trying to say that it's still going on there. They're still trying to say it's going on in Telford as well. They're still trying to say that it's going on in Newcastle, and those are the three major ones that we actually know about that have been investigated by the government, to the point where all three of them have had their council members resign because they tried to hide evidence from them. And yes, that's all three of them that have been investigated by the government have had council members have to resign because they held back evidence or withheld evidence from the investigation.
And remember what I told you about the non-disclosure agreements from the child's charities as well.
Yes,
so if the police don't find out about it, then the charities find out about it and they're not allowed to tell anybody.
Yep. Or the fact that the police, when the child agencies actually come forward to them, then get told that they're getting shut down, which happened in Telford and in Rotherham. But that's besides the point. As much as I hate that fact, and I hate the fact of that, you would think that an ideology that pushes the fact of feminism and making sure that the ideology of that and the protection of young girls and young adults and things like that, and making sure that they're all safe and everything else of that and equal rights, you'd think that they would be the ones that would be up in arms defending the young girls. Yet the left-wing media say that they consented to the sex to get around their ideology.
Yeah, that's one of the most insidious things about the whole episode. And but going, you want to cover the sort of not the football hooligan aspect, but the vigilantism, let's call it.
And well, that's the thing on this football lads, or the Democratic Football Lads Association. They don't actually go out and try and beat anybody up. They never have done. They've never gone out to try and fight anybody. They even come out and they actually say that they want peaceful demonstrations. This organization was not built for purpose fighting. It was built for making marches.
And just I've seen them operating. You probably have as well. I've seen them operating on Twitter, and what seems to be happening is basically they're acting like not handlers, like minders, basically. But it's not one affiliated group. They've been grouped together, but it's not.
Oh yeah.
Like, I mean, there are groups, and they do know each other. But what I'm saying is, like, this is a phenomenon,
they're groups
right?
Within a group. They're groups within a group. There's so many demographics.
Some of them are turning up to, like, say there's an arrest going on, and the police are arresting the dad of the victim rather than the guy that actually did it. These guys are turning up to things like that to make sure that.
There's a Sikh. I don't want to call it a brotherhood, but there's a Sikh documentary from a place that's actually exposing everything that's going on with them, and they've actually done a documentary exposing all of the groomers that are still around in these type of places. If you look for them on Twitter, you will find them. It is like Sikh brotherhood type of thing, and they are going around and actually trying to dispel these people from their fucking areas and their community.
I've seen some of their speeches actually. They seem like relatively all right people, but with the, I don't want to call it hooliganism, but what they are calling hooliganism, I've seen this thing where it's been completely. It's basically just been a safety in numbers game.
Yeah.
And some of them have been like, right, okay, if you need people around who aren't going to be pushovers, we will come up and see you. And then on the other side of the spectrum, I've seen people purporting to be from the same groups who have clearly just been fishing for Indiegogo money. Not Indiegogo, GoFundMe money. Like, we need equipment and, a car journey and train tickets. And it's clearly bullshit. Like, one of them was exposed, right? And this is the thing, is like, both of those things happened under the same umbrella. And it's like, the media are trying to paint out like this is an organized, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood style, anti-Muslim hit squad. And it's like, no, it's just a complete. It's
just a reactionary group. It's just like a form of Antifa without fucking demonstrations and destruction.
Also, Jensen, you're suspiciously quiet. I hope I'm not talking over you.
No, actually, all I'd like to point out is we've got a guy in the chat called Cuts or Designs. Apparently, he was actually there, and he's saying the left came towards us and a few lads pushed back. Nothing major.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to that. I've read it before. I've read this story before because I always read the stories pre-hand to make sure that they actually have some like decent content in them. And out of 700 people with the left that literally were counter-protesting the DFL, only 3 people were actually arrested out of the 700 people that were there. So if there was a massive amount of extremism or hooliganism, why was there only 3 people that got arrested? Don't tell me that 700 people can run away from the police.
No, you've got to remember that only 3 people, the moment it hits the media, becomes 3,000 rabid savages attacking everybody. You've got to always remember the modifier that the media put on things, okay? As long as you remember that, you're sorted.
Yeah. I mean, let's continue with the story so we can get a little bit further down and actually try and make headway of this. So the group was originally called the Football Lads Alliance and was set up by a football hooligan, which is absolutely amazing that they just go, yeah, he's a football hooligan. For what reason? Well, because he went to football and had a couple of fights? Or is it a case that he actually went out of his way to cause hooligan? I just hate that fucking term. For what reason? You can't just throw somebody out as a hooligan because he supports a football.
Yeah, it's quite a wide spectrum, isn't it? You've got basically organised crime versus guys who get in fights, and there's quite a long space in between those two things.
Yeah. I mean, you look at for the aspect of, I know it's a film, but it is based on reality of what happened, especially with West Ham and things like that. But you look at Green Street, some of the hooligans are actually bankers, airline pilots, fucking teachers. It's like they have day jobs. Just because that they go out and have a fight doesn't mean that they're hooligans for the rest of their. I just hate that fucking term. I really do. Right. Its founder called on football fans from around the country to unite against Muslim grooming gangs and Islamic terrorism. Amazing that it's not. What was it that you said it was? Islamic extremism. So it wasn't formed to fight Islamic extremism. It had a particular set which was to fight Muslim grooming gangs and Islamic terrorism. Interesting. So they had a specific set and were actually able to define what they were fighting rather than an umbrella term. Interesting that certain people can do that, but media can't. But the leader left and the group split, reforming with the word democratic slapped on at the front of it. It might have something to do with the fact that the reason why it split was because that the leader, so to speak, at that point didn't want expats coming into it, ex-military service personnel, and also Sikh communities and other people from other religions coming into it as well. And that's the reason why they put democratic in front of it, because all of those different subgroups were formed to make that group. But, you know, facts don't really matter. Facts don't matter, do they? So who are they? That's what I wanted to find out when I spent an afternoon with them during their most recent march in Sunderland on Saturday. As a journalist, I was a curious observer. Yeah, as a journalist, I love that. So
a whole afternoon, eh? You were really embedded in the inner workings of that organisation, weren't you?
See, I love this. You look at the picture that we've got in front of them. Yeah, okay, it looks like they're nationalistic because they got the Union Jack up there. They've got kids at the front. They've got old people near the back. They've got families that are out there. They've got a fucking Peppa Pig, by the looks of it, in the fucking back left corner near the brown building underneath the Union Jack, the big pink nose.
Yeah.
What's racist about this? Because what, they're all one demographic that you can see at the front because that's the reason why you took the picture?
Pretty much, yeah.
Go on, Jensen.
Just pretty much, I completely agree with you. They've taken that specific picture so as that they can target a specific group or ethnicity, i.e. the whites.
Yeah, I mean, you have a look at that group and look at them in their faces and their eyes. There is nothing more working class about these people than any other people out there. These are generally the proper working class people. You can see that in their eyes and the way that they're looking. They are the working class that you're supposed to be trying to protect and make sure that you're doing the right thing. But yet when they protest and tell you that they want something done, they're racist and nationalistic.
Well, here's an interesting experiment the government could do, and they won't do because they know it'll work. Instead of demonizing these people and exacerbating the problem and protecting people who like to rape young children,
yes,
what they could try is, these people have been really quite consistent for the last 20 years or so that they want something done about this problem with rape and molestation and grooming.
Yep. So
why not, as an experiment in a pilot area, say, okay, we're going to actually do something about it and see if these gangs, quote, disappear. Because I suspect they would. Because if you had foot patrol cops and a task force based on this with some special branch guys really looking into these groups would disappear overnight. Because they'd be seeing, these people trust institutions. Like you said, these are working class people who wave the Union Jack or up here probably the Saltire or both.
Yeah.
And they believe in these institutions and they feel betrayed by them. And if these institutions like the police and Parliament were to actually go, you know what, no, we're on your side, let's do something, these guys would just go back home.
Yeah.
I genuinely believe that. And then if they didn't, you would know who was a hooligan and who wasn't.
I completely agree with you. The thing is, people react to situations that are put in front of them. So this is a reactionary group that they feel that their government is not doing anything to help them and help people that are in their positions that are being raped, that are being molested, that are being passed around like fucking cigarettes, mind you. There's a story going around saying, I think it was in the Daily Mail, obviously, because they're the only rags that actually will report on it properly. But there's a story of a girl that was passed around by over 100 people. And the story reads, instead of I was raped by 100 people, it goes, I had forced sex with over 100 people. Language is fucking important, and that's the reason why people distrust you.
Yep. That should be called, like, the rape factory. That's the headline you lead with on that. No, yeah. I was forced to that.
Oh, the thing is that's absolutely funny about that, I forgot the rest of the fucking headline. The rest of the headline was, I was forced to have sex with over 100 people at gunpoint.
Fuck's sake.
That's not rape. That's just a specific fetish thing. Yeah, that's it. It's a fetish thing.
And this is the thing.
Consensual. She said yes because there was a gun involved. It's consensual.
Well, not everybody as well. Not everybody has the same amount of time and resources and educational background and all that pish, right? So what I might do, if that was happening in my local area visibly, and it was getting really bad, I might become a kind of citizen journalist kind of thing, because I can write, and I can take videos, and I can do stuff like that. If you're, like, working a full-time job, supporting a family, and all that shit, plus you know one of the girls, you're not going to be a citizen journalist. You're going to go fucking ballistic. Like, it's hard enough for us to stay calm, or particularly me anyway, talking about this stuff. Imagine, like, you know, actually seeing it going on, and then it's like, Occupy are allowed to get angry and storm private property because they're angry about the banking crisis, and that's acceptable. But a couple of nasty right-wingers want to turn up to a counter demonstration, and that's all hell broken loose. Like, how? What? Any sense of proportion would be nice, please.
It'd be nice to actually be representative properly, wouldn't it? The thing is that I think a lot of people are more pissed off at is not necessarily maybe of what happened. Now, don't get me wrong. When I say this, I'm not trying to say that it belittles the crimes themselves. But I think where most people are annoyed is the small amount that the government seemed to care, the small amount that it seemed that the police actually did anything. The fact of justice was just being like, you had sex with this person, did you? Oh, it doesn't matter about the gun that was pointed at your head. But you're saying that you had consented. Yeah, because I had a fucking gun to my head. But you consented. It's those type of weasel words that I think people have latched onto and realised that, wait, there's something going on here. Where if they actually went out of their way and actually convicted the people and threw away the key, so to speak, or deported some of them that are illegal, obviously, then it would be a case of not so many people would be so annoyed about what's going on. Yes, people would be annoyed about the crimes, but people are protesting because they perceive that the government isn't doing anything. That's because there aren't, but that's another story.
Well, they're doing plenty to cover it up.
To cover it up, yeah, they definitely are. Especially look at the local councils on that one, and the police services and the police chiefs.
And I won't belabor this point because I know you're wanting to keep moving, and we have spoken about this before. But let's not forget, back in the 70s and 80s, it was the BBC and the clergy that were doing this, but they got found out, and that was getting too hot too quick. So where have they gone to? The establishment pedos, the ones that run for high office but want their supply of young girls and boys. They go through these channels, so they can't afford for their, suppliers to be caught.
Yep.
And no, I don't have a huge amount of evidence to support that because we don't get any, because they don't get any investigations. But it seems to be that that's the case.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that one. I really do. I suppose I should actually go back to the fucking story. Oops, that's not going to work. So basically, the group was marching to show solidarity, and I'll get there because I had to do something. Solidarity with the victims of Muslim grooming gangs. The day began with supporters sinking a few beers in a local pub, probably getting to know each other and making sure that the spirits are high. Oh, the atmosphere was friendly, warm even. Oh, okay. Fair enough. That seems decent.
There's your weasel words again, though. Muslim grooming gangs. Like,
No.
why not industrial scale
Rape factories.
rape gangs, like, or something? You know, they've taken all the
Prostitution,
emotional
basically,
charge
isn't
out of
it?
the sentence.
Well, basically, it's forced prostitution, isn't it? It's basically forced pimping, which I thought was definitely illegal on its own, besides the actual forced rape.
Kidnapping as well, if you think about it.
Well, yeah, they also have trafficking violations that have
Yeah,
actually
false
been
imprisonment. They take the kids out of the country. They
Yep.
forcibly inject them with drugs.
Well, in Newcastle, they had their own, as far as I remember, from when the government actually put some money into the investigation and their own fucking task force to it. They actually found out that they had over. Oh, let me get this right. They actually got over 120 properties in Newcastle that were affiliated or associated with children that were either being held or being the purpose of being trafficked to the rest of the country.
Yeah, in shipping containers with a bucket to shit in.
In some cases. But I'm talking about literally the 120 properties that were mostly above kebab houses.
Got you, yeah.
But that's actually what they had. They had over 100, and that's in Newcastle alone, by the way, over 120 properties that actually were involved or directly associated with trafficking young girls, as in either holding them in that particular area, having where the rape or the molestation actually happened, or being prostituted or trafficked, and actually transferring them from one end of the country to another end of the country, or in actual fact selling them blindfolded to other people.
Yeah.
120
I think part of this as well with the media's language, I think part of it is accidental in that human trafficking is what law enforcement calls it, right?
Don't fall for that.
No.
It's not done unpurposely. It's done purposely to detract from the outrage that's going on.
Well, no, definitely, but I mean, like, half and half. Well, not even half and half, but some of it is. The word I would use is enslavement, but the crime is not called enslavement; it's called human trafficking, right? So, but then what the media don't realize, or do realize, or both, is that if they say human trafficking, it takes the emotion out of the sentence, and it makes them sound like property, which is exactly how these rapists want these girls to be looked at, by the way.
Yep.
And so if they say, oh, human trafficking, it makes them sound like a commodity.
Yep.
But if you say slaves, then people automatically know what a slave is, and they'll want something done about it. And it's really despicable the way they manipulate the language, because that's what I was, rape gang, slaves, because I mean that's what they are. I don't know what people think, because they're like they're talking about like these young girls, and I don't know what they're picturing in their heads, but I'm like, it's a young girl. She should be fucking having her first girl or boyfriend. She should be learning how to put on makeup. She should be going to school and getting her hires. Like, that's... And what is she doing? She's living in one room being passed around 100 guys filled full of drugs and beating the shit out of. Like, how is this not driving people insane?
A lot of people don't read the stories and don't realise that these groomers and these rapists and these basically slave masters, as you correctly have portrayed, we're actually picking these girls up from the age of 12 from outside their high schools, to the point of where the schools knew that the taxis that were outside were waiting for girls. This is how they met them, by the way, as well, and indoctrinated them, and then embodied them to come in and ply them with alcohol and whatnot to indoctrinate them into their little tax and everything. Mm-hmm. Because they would park outside the schools, pick them up, and then drive them and lock them away in their own houses or wherever they wanted to go to forcefully be able to get their way with them.
And they're white working class girls, so who cares?
Yeah, they would pick them up after school every day as well. And if they weren't at school, they would pick them out from outside of their own homes or near their homes. And if they were trying to run away, the men, I use that fucking loosely, the men would actually say and threaten to the little girls, if you run away or tell anybody, I'm going to rape your mum, I'm going to kill your sister, and I'm going to burn your house down. To the point of when in Telford, there's 4 houses that have been burnt down, 1 girl run over by a car, 1 girl fallen off of the bonnet of a car, and 2 people that have died, which unfortunately I forget the names of, but a mother and a daughter. And the fact of that she was pregnant at the time when her house was being set on fucking fire.
Yeah.
But, you know, the human existence doesn't really matter. You know, all Muslims are great. All Muslims are this. The thing is, not all of them are. Same as not all white people are great. Not all black people are great. But you have to deal with what's put in front of you and deal with the situation. As we've already said before, you take one problem and you deal with it at a time. So if you have the problem of people raping somebody or somebody that's not fitting into a place, you don't pick the fucking problem that is, well, you're not integrated properly. You pick up the one that's fucking raping.
Yeah. And I honestly don't think people can actually comprehend the level of tragedy we're talking about here, because it's like one of the other things that always pops up in these discussions is, oh, well, where are the parents? It's like, they're nowhere. The parents are on drugs or they're alcoholics and they don't give a shit. And that makes it even worse.
Or they don't even know. Or in some cases, and especially the cases of the one that I knew, they, which was Lucy from Telford. You can find her. They did a massive spread about her in the Daily Mail. In fact, I did a video on it if you wanted to go through my channel. Lucy herself, her dad didn't even know anything that was going on about it because Lucy was so scared of telling her parents what was going on because she thought her dad would react and go and get himself killed because of it. And she had every right to think of this because as soon as her dad did find out, he went over to try and get his little daughter back from this boyfriend that's 27 years of age at the time and her only being 14 and pregnant twice at that point in time. Yes, twice. And he went and tried to get into the place. The police were called and he told the police that he was trying to get to his daughter. Guess what happened? He got arrested. He then got death threats from people that followed what was going on. He was then didn't really go outside of his house, and he was the one that had his house burnt down with his wife and his other daughter, which was younger, burnt alive.
Yep.
And the media would like to put it, and he was the one in the wrong because he said the wrong words.
Yeah. By the way, sorry everybody in the chat if I get a little bit overbearing with it. It's just that these are stories that I've rehashed and gone over, and I've put time and effort into learning their names and their identities, and you kind of get, as you should do, you kind of get an attachment to them and you want to get justice for them. So if I do sound like I'm a little bit angry or aggressive, I fucking am, because it pisses me off a hell of a lot.
And I apologise twice as much because common sense is far more composed about it than I am. But the criminal fucking, well, not genius, but the criminal intelligence of it in Oxford, or Oxfordshire, I don't know which one, probably both. But what they were doing was these guys were targeting kids that were basically should have been in care. Like the parents were so neglectful that no one even knew they were missing.
Yeah.
And that, like, imagine that. Imagine this kid, not being just being taken away from our parents, but taken away from her parents who don't give a fuck, who are so out of their brains on alcohol and drugs that they probably don't even know they've got a kid. And it's like, that's I mean, that's the closest I can think of to hell as a human being. If I try and empathize with that person as I can get to it, that's a living hell. Unbelievable. And what are they going to do with their lives after that? When they're, you know, if they live through it and get to 25 and somehow escape, what are they going to do? All their school years are gone. They've got a drug addiction. You know, it's just unbelievable. But yeah. But oh no, we've got to get rid of those nasty football hooligans. They're the real problem.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Moz. I am going to quickly show that very, very quickly. For actually showing me what I was talking about the 100 girls with the gun. So I know that this is my Twitter feed and this is my mentions, but I'm sure that the people wouldn't be too bothered about what they do see and what they don't see. And yes, I have a message because I'm popular. But as you can see, it's from an actual proper newspaper, The Record, which is a local newspaper, believe it or not. And obviously this is from All Well and Good, had seen this newspaper himself and has obviously photoshopped it. And the actual headline itself says, "Trafficked girl slept with over 100 Asian men." All before she was 16, court was told.
And it's just, yeah,
That's the language. That's the fucking language that you got to deal with the newspapers and the media that are reporting on it. Traffic girls slept.
You know what baffles me about it is Boris Johnson has an affair and everything is sensationalized. Like, all the language is ramped up, all the photographs look really provocative. The article is written to just drag everybody's name through the mud and make it sound as scandalous as possible. Yep. A slave who is a child is raped repeatedly at gunpoint, and we have to tone everything down because something might happen. Unbelievable.
Well, somebody might get offended that's the wrong colour. We wouldn't want somebody that is of a different orientation to us to be upset because, you know, it might destroy their integration.
Also, I was going to say quickly, because I know you want to move on, but the one thing was, I recommend this to everybody. There's a show, if you can still get it on Channel 4 on demand. I don't know if you still can. It's called Red Riding.
It was horrible.
What?
Anything on Channel 4 is horrible.
Oh, this wasn't. This was a few years ago. It was called Red Riding, and it was about the West Yorkshire Police's corruption during the Yorkshire Ripper, and
about
the paedophile ring surrounding that as well. And if you want to know why people in the media and shit like that aren't doing more about this, it's a good fucking place to start looking, because
the amount of threatening money changing hands, people disappearing, police officers disappearing. Yeah, I remember it now.
It's a really, really good. I know it's drama, but it's a really good.
It's a drama, but it's based on real events. I mean,
exactly.
Dramatized, but it's based on real events.
Yeah, and all they've done is kind of add scenes to personify what actually happened. So it's not like they're making this shit up, and it shows you perfectly how much risk is involved in outing these people and how high this sort of stuff goes. And this is what I mean by, this is the business that's booming just now, and this is why nobody in high office is investigating it, because they don't use the same methods or the same sources of children anymore. This is the new source.
Have I missed something? I know that you're directly in the middle of something, but literally the next article is Corbyn backs news that's just come up. It's not a story that's been written. It's a story that's just come up on Sky News. Have I missed something? Has the general election been fucking called or something? Corbyn backs Sky News election TV debate campaign. Several senior politicians are supporting the Sky News campaign after leaders avoided head-to-head TV debates in 2015 and 2017. They're ramping up the fucking language for a fucking general election, aren't they?
Just a bit.
They're already ramping it up. Fucking hell. They've had all the other ones come out as well today, haven't they? Jeremy Corbyn has backed Sky News campaign for an independent commission to run TV debates between party leaders ahead of the general elections. I hope they include fucking UKIP and Britain First. Not because I want Britain First to win, but it'll be interesting to see fucking Labour debate Britain First.
Also, if you have Britain First on the same stage as UKIP, it stops them being able to paint UKIP as Britain First.
Yeah, being compared.
Because you would see how sensible UKIP actually fucking are compared to Britain First.
Yes, very much so.
And how sensible Britain First are compared to the fucking BNP. I don't like the Britain First, by the way, but we're not talking about the BNP here. They really are a bit nuts.
Just a little bit, yeah. I welcome the move that guaranteed the election debate so that voters can hear directly from those putting themselves forward to lead the country. Didn't you purposely oppose to it? Because if I remember correctly, Theresa May said that she would do it, but you said no.
I think did they not both say no?
I'm sure that Theresa May said that she was up for it, but Jeremy Corbyn wasn't. But then again, I may be a little bit biased on that. I might be adding to it. But
Cameron definitely didn't want it.
No, that was in 2015, yeah.
And then I don't know, I think Theresa May just continued with that during the last election. I don't like it. I don't think it's a good idea, because these debates never last long enough. They're very controlled. The media gets to decide what the questions are. They get to decide what the audience is. They get to decide how long it goes on for. I don't like it at all.
That's the thing that I dislike. They get to decide what the audience is. Mm-hmm. And even somebody like my mum and dad, which sort of half and half, they're more Labour than they are Conservative, which, bless them, they grew up that way. But even they can point out to the people that go, oh, well, that person's momentum. you can tell that person's momentum, or you can tell that person was put there. And
well, remember the Farage thing of this is an entirely left-wing audience, and then Dimbleby was like, actually, they've been selected from like 1/6 from each party. It's like, yes, and 5 of those 6 are left-leaning, so it's an entirely left-wing audience.
Yeah. Well, it's the same as Jacobs Rees-Mogg when Jacobs Rees-Mogg took over Question Time and was saying that the BBC or Auntie something or other, and was saying no, they are one of the most biased news outlets that are out there. And Dimbleby, as you already said, was like, well, no, we're not. Honest, it's like, well, how many times do you say that Brexit's going to fail? So how many times do you say that Brexit's going to succeed? How many times do you have somebody that's pro-Brexit on compared to people that are not pro-Brexit? And Dimbleby just went, yep, time to move on.
And it's the fact that it's TV debates as well, which is fun. If any of these leaders had a modicum of sense, which they don't because they have to be able to lie, what they would do is they would go, oh yeah, no, I'll debate you on Joe Rogan or Alex Jones or fucking, what do you call it? What's the really famous London radio station? LNC? LBC?
LBC.
You know, like stuff that isn't TV that has many, many, many more people that watch it. I would do something like that. I reckon you could have the election in the back.
No, I have to agree with that.
It's like 15 million people watch InfoWars. Joe Rogan's up to 1 billion downloads in total on his podcast. LBC gets something like, it's something stupid like 5 million people a day. It's like,
I don't disbelieve it.
That's how you do it. Nothing. Don't bother with ITV or anything like that.
But to be fair, TV's a dying medium. That's the reason why I'm not going to go into it, but there's a reason why Article 11 and 13 have been passed, because they know that the media outlets are dying. So for people to go back to the media outlets, what do? You stop the creators from creating.
Mm-hmm. Which won't work.
It will, because if you have the algorithms that are going to be stopping people, and you have the taxes and everything else like that, link taxes and whatnot, and direct copyrights for whatever you do, you won't be able to do what we're doing today, even on this type of stream, because I've got links that are put in there for everybody, and I'm actually showing what I'm talking about. So we wouldn't be even able to do a live stream like this. It will get taken down.
If this ever became a serious issue, all that would happen is the deep web would become the standard for everybody, and they would have no way of tracking it.
Yep.
There's a possibility. There's possibility. I hope it does, to be fair.
There'd be millions of university students studying computing who'd be aghast at this and make a Tor app for iPhone or something like that anybody can use, and that's how it would be done.
Yeah. Well, you know it's bad when you get the YouTube CEO Winchesky or whatever her fucking name is coming out saying, "Oh, it's going to stop creativity from all our European people because it's going to stop the left-leaning people as well. So we need to fight for it."
I think that was just lip service, though, because I think that they're more than happy for this model to happen because it means they're the only companies that would be able to afford to operate in Europe.
I don't know, because you have to remember as well, with places like, especially with America, you've got so many places that have their own internet sites and things like, you look at the Daily Wire, you look at Stephen Crowder, that have their own internet sites as well as, and InfoWars as well, obviously, or did have, that have their own internet sites where they can compete with the news outlets. It's more of a case for them that they have to stop the creativity. So they have to have their Voxes, their Now This, that are immensely funded compared to anybody else. So something like 300 grand per video. The stupidness. Where you've got your CNNs and things like that, where YouTube is their majority of where people go to get their news. Not because necessarily we know what we're talking about, but because it's better fucking entertainment.
The thing I think that will happen though is, and the reason I think that they are just saying this, is they've already exported their products in censored form to China and things like that, and it works. And now they're the only people that get to provide the service. So they're probably not making as much money as they could in a free market system, but they're the only people making money. And I think they'd be more than happy for that to happen in Europe, because the other thing is, let's not forget, Google doesn't pay any fucking tax.
Nope.
And neither does Facebook, and neither does Apple. So it's not like it'll actually cost them anything. And then if they're already not paying tax, then it's not going to take much more persuasion for them to go, you know, Merkel, we're the only people that can provide a platform. We're happy to make it your platform. Could we just not pay the fines? And she'd probably be fine with that.
Probably. Right, let's get on with these last three stories because I know that somebody's probably got to get off to go to another stream anyway very shortly. So if you did want to do that, mate, you're more than welcome to.
Okay, thank you. I will soon, but I'm definitely want to be involved in this one just because I've got a very, very simple message to put with this one.
Yep, sure. I'm going to quickly read through these couple of stories because I really want to do the video with crumplepoint. So we'll probably end up going to half past if crumplepoint's able to stay with us as well, obviously.
Yeah, I'm free. Just I don't want to hold Jensen up, so that's fine.
That's fine. That's why I'm going to quickly read through this. Right. May tells rebels, it's my Brexit deal or no deal. So this is from London Routers. Prime Minister Theresa May told the rebels in her divided party that if they torpedoed her Brexit deal in the United Kingdom, would leave the EU without any agreement. She does realise that that's what most Brexiteers actually want. So well done her. A scenario the IMF said would make the country much poorer, but never actually provided any fucking evidence for why it would go poorer, just said that we would lose trade because it would expect us not to trade with Europe, even though we would do. But whatever. Right, the United Kingdom is due to leave the EU on March 29th, and yet little is clear so far. No full exit agreement has been reached, and some right-wing rebels in May's Conservative Party, which is almost close to the 80-something that's needed to actually threaten her leadership in general, actually, to be fair. More and more people are sending in letters day by day. Have threatened to vote down a deal if she clinches one. The fate of May's government and her Brexit plan is in doubt because it is unclear whether she can command the 320 votes she needs in the House of Commons, the lower house of the British Parliament, to approve the deal. And that's the end of there. No, it's not. I think that the alternative to that will be not having a deal, May told BBC TV, adding she was confident of getting a good agreement she thought Parliament would ultimately approve. Well, if you honestly think that, then you're a fucking idiot. Because even people on the left are not going to vote for your Chequers deal because it doesn't give them what they want. People on the right are not going to vote for it because it doesn't give them what they want. So, well done on giving us a no deal. I always knew you could do it, honey. Recent signals from Brussels have buoyed hopes that the United Kingdom and the EU could agree and approve a proper divorce arrangement before it leaves, though the sides are still divided on about 1/5 of the detail of the deal. You know, both sides are not divided. The EU is stopping us. Let's get that fucking into proportions and into proper context. We've already provided them with 3 different deals in the ideas of actually negotiations. The EU has stopped it and completely and utterly said that they're not going to be interested in it every time. If you want to blame anybody for having a no deal, blame the fucking EU for not accepting the deals that are already put on the table. But many business chiefs and investors fear politics could scupper a deal, thrusting both the EU and the United Kingdom into a no deal Brexit that they say would weaken the West. Really? So it's not going to just weaken the United Kingdom, it's going to weaken the West as a whole. That's fucking ingenious language, though. Well done. Panic financial markets and blocked the arteries of trade. You mean because we're the ones that move around the most amount of gold because we have the most amount of gold in our treasuries? Is that the reason? London Mayor Sadiq Khan said on Sunday that as Britain now faces a choice between a bad Brexit deal or a damaging no deal Brexit, voters should be giving another referendum.
Oh, God.
As he actually said, we should have a second people's vote, and then he fucked up and he said, no, we should actually have a vote to stop Brexit.
I think it's remarkable that that anyone even pays attention to him. He is the mayor of one city. He has absolutely no business talking about national policy. None.
He's the mayor of London. He's important, don't you know?
Well, that is the attitude, and that genuinely is what people think. And it's just like, well, why? London is a city, one city, and he is the mayor of it. Well, some of it, and that's it. He doesn't have anything. He has less credence talking about national policy now than he did when he was just a backbencher.
Yeah, pretty much. The thing is that I always love about Sadiq Khan is that people generally forget that he was the human rights lawyer that looked after the people from 9/11. Generally, people forget that.
He's human rights lawyers fucking. We have this opinion of them that they're like going around the world, sticking up for the poor people who've been put in prison against their will and all, like, for not really breaking any real laws and all that sort of.
Human rights
lawyers appear to just go around undermining. Sorry, I couldn't hear you there. Sorry.
No, I was literally just going to say, but unfortunately it went too far. But I was going to say that human rights lawyers always go with the people that have the money, which generally are not nice humans.
Well, yeah, and the other thing is that they're entirely, from what I view, from following Amnesty International online now, which I never did before. They appear on Question Time with a spokesperson. Like, it's Amnesty International. They're good people. See if you actually look at the cases they prioritise. They're just another government-funded think tank.
Yep. With
an army of like weaponized lawyers to basically overturn the national policy of other countries. That's basically what because I used to think Shami Chakrabarti, for instance, I used to think she was fucking badass. I used to think she was awesome. And now I've realised that she's just another filthy commie who wants to overturn like the laws of countries that she has no business talking about.
Yep.
And that was a big wake-up call for me as well. Like, so the human rights lawyers, it sounds nice, doesn't it? Because it's like, who can disagree with human rights?
Well, Tony Blair can. Tony Blair can, and you have to remember that Tony Blair started as a human rights lawyer, and so did Cherry Blair. And under the Labour, when Labour were in charge, so many human rights laws are actually changed and wants to be changed to be able to help the lawyers rather than the people. I wonder why that happened.
Yeah, and Tony Blair started the whole rendition trend as well.
Yes. Right, sorry, gentlemen. I know that you want to get off. What part of this story do you want to get to so you can have your say?
Actually, my say is very, very simple. No deal is actually probably going to be a better deal for us overall than any of the rubbish that they are trying to slip into their little agreements that are still going to try to control us. We are meant to be leaving. We should leave. Have nothing more to do with them. I know it's the standard joke of screw you guys, I'm going home. But in this case, this is what the people actually wanted. Politicians, and this part is almost humorous to say, but politicians are meant to listen to the people. We are the people that put them in their job. They are supposed to be our representatives, and they are not representing the people. They're representing their own wallets, quite simply.
Yep, I agree with that.
Okay. And thanks for having me on, but I do have to sort of bug. Hope you two have a good time, and I'll speak to you another time, guys.
So, yeah, sorry to miss you, Jensen, and it's been good talking to you.
No worries, man. Speak to you later, guys. Bye-bye.
No worries. Jensen, give my best to Mad Dodge.
Yeah, will do, mate. Will do.
No worries, mate. See you soon. Right.
I'm just going to stretch my legs. We've got a bit of extra room in here. Hey.
Poor
Jensen. I like having him around, but needs must.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, sometimes I was looking at the time and I knew that he had prior operations or prior engagement, so it was fine. This story basically goes off into how bad a no deal will be for the United Kingdom. The thing is on this one that will take up the rest of the stream for what we've already got time for or allocated for. I'm not really interested in that.
No, I'm happy to move on to the next story because I have nothing to add to what Jensen said. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think that Miss May giving the ultimatum of if you don't back my deal, we're going to get a no deal is kind of like putting a red flag to a ball.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going to ensure that we have a no deal. But then again, is that part of her policy and her idea? Because if they then say, well, now I ain't got a checkers deal, we definitely are going to get a no deal and then push for a second referendum or a general election to then push for a second referendum.
Two thoughts on that. Firstly, she has no idea the constitutional crisis she will unleash if that happens. No idea. It'll be remarkable. I know the British are pretty domesticated, and I don't expect people on the streets or anything like that. But it will be. She doesn't want to do that. The second thing is, I don't think she's actually that smart, and my source for this is that video on South Africa.
Yeah, no, I completely united agree with you. Her dancing was not great. And nor was the policy of, yeah, they're not killing white farmers. See my friend CC.
Disgusting, by the way. Like, everybody needs to follow Conscious Caracal and Ernst Roots and keep an eye on what's going on in South Africa because it is utterly appalling. And it's
getting worse.
The only reason they're not calling it a genocide is because there's not enough bodies yet.
Well, the only reason why they're not calling it a genocide is because it's a government full of black people killing white people. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my point on that one. I do honestly think that it doesn't matter if May's intelligent enough. You have to remember that the EU is behind the decisions that are going on.
Yeah.
They're looking for ways of being able to weasel their way out. They are the ones that are purposely stalling to try and get to this position to then purposely put funding in, surprise, surprise, with George Soros and people of his ilk that are pushing for a people's vote, even though the people don't want to fucking vote. And anybody that's ever done any sort of poll will always go to the same question to prove that they don't want to have Brexit anymore. Are you happy with the way that May is dealing in Brexit? Do you want to remain in the EU as a second one? And the do you want to remain in the EU is always lower than are you happy with the way that May's doing the Brexit? So they take it as a fact of, oh, public opinion is changing. No, it's not. It's the way that you fucking phrased the question, dickhead.
Yeah, because actually a lot of that will be Remainers are starting to get really angry. And a lot of Remainers, the not so noisy ones, are just of the mind that, look, the vote was had. And that's that.
Yeah.
And let's get on with our own country now. And I've spoken to a few of them who would now just vote leave just because they would be angry at being asked again.
Yep.
And there's three outcomes, and they're all the same. The outcome one is just the level of how uncomfortable they want to make it for themselves and us. Outcome one is we get our Brexit, no deal, and life is quite difficult in the short term, and that probably breeds excellence, and we flourish in the long term.
Yeah.
The second option is we get a deal, and the first thing that I said still happens, but a bit slower and more comfortably. And the third option is that we stay in the EU in some form or another, and it will collapse in 10 years.
Yeah.
Because it's not just us. It's like we said at the beginning, every other country, particularly the smaller ones that people like to write off, are getting furious with this. But even the Belgians are getting sick of the EU, by the way. You know, where the EU is located. They're getting sick of the EU, the Belgians. And it's like, it takes a lot to piss them off.
Belgians. But that's the thing, though. You have to remember that the reason why the Belgians are actually getting so pissed off is because they're getting France's dregs. And by dregs, I mean the people from the Calais camps and things like that, and the terrorists that are actually going around in that aspect. Remember that most of the terrorists that have tried to do stuff in France go through Belgium first.
Yeah. Well, they've had more attacks than France, have they not?
Yeah.
Or is it more? No, they can't possibly have. But maybe it's more per capita than more actual attacks. No, Belgians have been absolutely battered by this.
They've actually had more terrorist attack than France. The thing is with France is that they normally use vehicles, or they normally have some sort of a gun or something that's actually going to be doing it. The reason why terrorist attack in Brussels are not really talked about is because it's normally knives and machetes.
Yes, yes. And you can put that down to crime rather than terrorist crime.
Yeah, it's crime. That amazing thing that's called crime.
Yep, that was another thing. Is I've said for years, it shouldn't be called terrorism. It should just be called crime, and everybody gets treated exactly the same way.
Yeah, no, it's terrorism. Tell it like it is.
No, but I mean, what is terrorism? Well, terrorism is a crime. So it should either be demonstrated as an act of war or a standard crime, and that way you can't politicize it. The person goes to jail, and they go to jail for the maximum amount of time that they can for the crime that they committed. So, if somebody is a terrorist, they get deported. Or
you have to differentiate what the crime is, otherwise every crime will be treated as the same. So just because it needs to be put down as a statistic as a crime doesn't mean that it should be denoted as a crime, because it's terrorism or it's murder or it's rape. It's not a crime. It's those direct things that are crimes, but they still need their direct names.
Oh yeah, no, fair enough. But it seems to have its own special little status, and that annoys me. But there's a thing. I just want to give you a quick thought and see what you think of it, because I know you like to think about these sorts of things as well. But one of the saddest things about the EU and the emphasis on the big cosmopolitan cities all the time is that we really have lost sight of the Enlightenment era. Is probably like my favorite era to read about in history, and there used to be the Grand Tour, and the Grand Tour was you have all these cities throughout Europe, and they're quite obscure little ones. You've got like Edinburgh here, and then you've got Vienna and Prague and Venice, and they were all linked up by the Grand Tour, and that's why buildings in these places look like one another. For instance, like you can look at buildings in Vienna, and they actually look similar to buildings in Edinburgh, and it's like we have all these relationships with these countries that have just been forgotten about. The Netherlands as well. Yeah. And it's sad. We have these deep roots back with these countries, and they've just been forgotten about.
But that's the thing. When people like Russell Brand talk about the idea of nationalism, people think it's the idea, or civic nationalism to be precise. They think that it's the idea of shutting oneself off from one's other nations and being self-efficient and self-dependent. That's not what civic nationalism, or even in most aspects of nationalism, don't actually denote. They actually just say that they're proud of being their own country, depending on what aspect of nationalism you go under. But using the idea of civic nationalism, it's proud of the culture that you have. It's proud of the country that you inherit. It's proud of the morals that you have. That doesn't mean that you stop trading with Holland. It doesn't mean you stop trading with other places. It doesn't mean that you don't have friends that are outside of your country. It doesn't mean that. It just means that you're proud of your own culture. You have all these leftists to say, oh, but we have to make sure that we have the African culture, the Muslim culture, the Jewish culture, the fucking pink tiger culture. Well, what about the English culture? What about German culture? What about French culture? What about the culture of the Europeans? And I can hear in the back of my head that white male privilege thing coming through. You're a white male. White people don't have privilege, and white people don't have culture. It's like, yeah, we do. Just look around in every single city. See that it's different. See the architecture is different. See that the history is different. See that the actual artistic expressions are in each and every city in the nations, let alone the nations themselves, are completely and utterly different. And you don't think that that's a form of culture that's worth preserving?
Well, you've got to know who you are as well, like individually and collectively. And the only way you can know who you are is to know where you've come from.
Yep.
And I didn't come from Paris. Like, my culture and my personality were shaped by British Enlightenment and medieval figures. That's where it came from. Yep. And it's that simple. It's like, people use the term, for example, cultural Christian and things like that now, because people like myself who are atheists, and I think this applies to you somewhat as well.
Yep.
Look at people like Mill and Locke and other thinkers like that, and they go, well, okay, those guys were their thinking was entrenched in the Christian history of this country.
Yeah, definitely.
And that has shaped my thinking. And I don't believe in God, but I believe in everything they fucking wrote otherwise. And therefore, my culture is a Christian one.
Yeah.
And that doesn't need to be the case forever. Maybe we will have a secular culture going into the future. That's fine. But,
yeah, but that's the point,
things
though,
like that. Voltaire was big, right? But he's not influenced our country in the same way that the aforementioned guys have. And like what you were saying about all these things are different. Do you know what's the same around the world? Every law enforcement and every legal system is based on the Scottish one, and every parliament is is based on the English one. So let's be proud of that for a minute, why don't we?
Yeah, let's not be proud of the Scottish law system. Nobody wants sheriffs.
Sheriffs?
Well, sheriff courts.
Oh, they're not bad. I mean, they're pretty efficient when they're not being fucking horribly misused.
Yeah, that's the thing. They can easily be manipulated and used. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. I would like to add to your quick point before. I've dropped the Lib Dem story because let's be honest, we all knew Vince Cable was going to try and stop Brexit. It's not really a story. But I just wanted to add to your point and go to one step further. When people go religion hasn't done anything for anybody. Religion has done things for people. It's been able to increase the idea of science. It's been able to increase the idea of philosophy, the idea of free thinking, the idea of free will, the idea of being able to push and try and be a scholar and actually understand the idea of academia. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Those things all come from a religious perspective, whether it be from Muslim, Jewish, or Christian. They all have their idea of scholarship. They all have their idea of academia. And all of this has come from a religious point of view. Yes, there are lots of things that are wrong with religion and the idea of the dogma of it. But you can't just look at individual things and go, well, that's just completely bad, and then still be able to use some aspects of what we do now. I mean, the idea of having our tenets, the idea of what our moral compass is still coming from a form of religion. Now, don't get me wrong, I think the tenets were actually writ for the idea and purpose of people that had a moralistic vow anyway. So I don't think it was written by God or anything else like that. I think it was written by people that had common sense, pun intended. And I think that's the reason why people can attest to it and go, well, that's the reason why it was easily followed. Because the 10 Commandments, if you follow them, they're quite easy. All it means is don't hurt anybody that you know or see. It's not hard to follow that. But that's the basis of most of our westernized civilization and culture. You look at Chinese culture, for instance. Yes, it's an amazing culture. And yes, their moral system is similar, but it's not the same. If you look at other cultures that are similar, but they're not the same, it's because that they had a different religion. The religion is different. And yes, people can say all they like about religions are very much similar. They are. But the processes and the ideas are very much different. That's the reason why people follow different religions, because the ideas themselves are what actually appeal to them, or unless they were forced into it. And that's a completely different thing and a different story and a reason. One of the reasons why I hate religion. But the basis of religion is the foundation of what every country has and is built on. Whether you want to believe that or not is irrelevant. That's the truth of it. And I'm as atheist can be, but you still have to give the idea and props and be perfectly fucking honest and intellectually honest that is our foundation. That's what we built our civilizations on. Wherever we are in the world was the religion that was first, that we built our culture around.
Yeah, and I don't see why people have such a problem with that, because I think that the development of humanity is very similar to the development of an individual. And I'm not terribly happy about the fact that I used to shit my pants and play with Lego and, play with imaginary beasties and pretend I was hitting them with my night costume and things like that when I was little. But I did it, and it had its value. And because I know that, I know where I came from, and I know what that led to. And so, okay, yeah, we had some barbaric, ridiculous practices back in the day. So does everybody who's ever been alive, because you used to be a toddler. Like,
Yeah.
why is it that we're not allowed to even see the value in or the mistakes in what we've done? And I totally agree with everything you just said, by the way, and I think it's a good point. And the dogma side of things is interesting as well, because I hate dogma, right? But you have to. It's an essential part of life, because you and me know that, like, you and me could look at things and go, without being able to fully articulate why, that's not the British way. That's dogma.
Yep.
And it can be very, very noble and very good. It's a problem when it starts to be controlling and clamping down on freedom and things like that. That's bad. And that's the whole point of having a parliament, so you've got people keeping an eye on that. But it has its uses, it has its utilities, and that is one of them.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's. I mean, I'm one of those people that tries to be as intellectually honest as possible. I don't like when people go, "Oh, religion hasn't done anything because religion's bad." I don't like that. The same as I don't like the idea of when people go, "Oh, there's nothing good out of socialism." There is. There's socialistic programs that come out of the idea of socialism. I'm for those type of programs. I'm also for the ideas of capitalism. But the thing is, I like the idea of mixing the ideas together. I think that's the most important thing that is integral to humankind and human makeup. Is the fact of being able to talk to somebody else, interacting with them and discussing the ideas and running through the ideas so that they are similar. So my idea can help you and your idea can help me. I think that's integral, and that's also a part of religion. Do people honestly feel, if we're being honest, that religion was made up on the spot? Or do they think that it took hundreds of years to get to where it is at this level, with ideas being changed and cherished and then juxtaposed and then sort of rewritten in different areas? I think that the Bible has been rewritten 5 times. I think the Quran's been rewritten around about 7 to 8 times. I think the Hindu script themselves is always continuously being rewritten. I'm not too sure about other religions, but those are the 3 to 4 religions that I know about. The Torah itself, as far as I'm aware, has been rewritten twice and has been destroyed once. But that's the point. Religion itself is not necessarily written by God. It's written by humans that interpret God's view. Now, I'm as atheist can be. I don't believe in a God, but it's still coming through that they're thinking that God has given them this wisdom, when in actual fact is just purely common sense. Again, with pun intended. Should we do this last little video and see if we can get that done? Because we're losing people. We're losing people. We've only got 4 people left.
We're losing them, Doc.
We're losing them. We're losing them. God damn it, we're losing them. Yeah. So that's.
Do you have the Twitter link, by the way? I'll tweet it out briefly. Quickly, even not briefly. Well, I suppose it is brief.
Yeah, there's no point. I want to do this story anyway, so people can come back to it and watch it. And a lot of my subscribers, my followers, they don't watch it when I first do it. They always do it a day after or 2 days after.
I was going to say, just because if I could briefly. No, I'll save it for my final word. Actually, that's all right.
Fair enough. I forgot about that shit. God damn it.
Well, I'll be quick regardless, but I don't want to interrupt your flow.
No, that's fine. Right. You're going to have to tell me if you can hear this or not before we actually start playing properly. There is going to be a advert in this as well, because I can't get rid of it.
Peter, why has Britain gone to hell a handcuff? Oh, Britain.
Can we hear all that?
Yep, it's coming through your mic and not the thing, but I can hear it fine. It's fine.
Yeah, because I'm on Hangouts, I can't put it through a desktop link. As in it coming through the desktop. So it has to go through the mic, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a bit tinny, but I think I can follow. I think I've already seen this video anyway, so.
Well, it's your video that you sent me.
Indeed.
His suicide in 1914 by joining the First World War, which he never needed to do, and then rapidly became bankrupt, lost its naval supremacy, and shortly afterwards lost its empire. That's evident. And once you've lost all those things, all kinds of other things follow.
Well, see, we seem to be thriving right now if we ended it all in 1914.
I would just like to say that he didn't say that we ended it all. I mean, don't get me wrong, Hitchens can fucking speak for himself. But he didn't say that we ended it all. He was saying that instead of it being a continuous growth, and instead of us actually growing as we were, even though people would like to say that was imperialism and blah, 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 and colonialism and blah, 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 we were growing and we had a strong economy. We were doing very, very well. We didn't have any sort of personal debt. We didn't have any private debt. We were doing really well. And because we decided to go to war when we didn't fucking have to, we kind of fucked that all up. I think that's what he says.
Well, what do you mean by thriving? We have a gigantic public debt, a gigantic private debt. We import far more than we export.
We're safer and more prosperous than we've ever been.
Well,
terrorist attacks. We've had more terrorist attacks in the last 2 years than we've had in the last 20. No, let me rephrase that, the last 10. Don't go to the 80s.
Well, everybody on the planet's more prosperous than they've ever been. It's a case of, are we as prosperous as we should have been at this point in history? And the answer is obviously no.
Well, no, I definitely agree that we're definitely not as prosperous as we should be, especially with the world wars.
Well, 2008 banking crash as well, even in more recent times, that shouldn't have happened. What led to that? How was that possible? Everybody lost money in that.
True. We're still losing money because of it now.
Yep. Pensions are worthless. Stock prices are going down. All that shit. So imagine that hadn't happened. Where would we be then? So that's the same argument that he's making.
I completely agree. I absolutely love Christopher Hitchens. We'll find out the reasons why I love Christopher Hitchens very soon because he.
No, this is Peter Hitchens, or do you mean Christopher?
Well, this is Christopher Hitchens, isn't it?
No, this is Peter Hitchens.
Is it? I thought it was Christopher Hitchens.
No, this is Peter Hitchens.
Oh. Never mind then. I don't know what I'm talking about.
That's an extraordinary thing to say, but whether it's also not a question of whether we're more prosperous than we've ever been, is whether we're more prosperous than we would have been if we hadn't engaged.
Well, one of the 6 largest economies in the world. I don't ever get to finish a
sentence here. But
welcome to the program, Peter. Welcome to the
program. Come here talking about a book.
Right.
God damn it is Peter.
I was just like, quickly with the interruption point there. Who else gets treated like that when they're doing, oh, let's talk about this book that's just come out? This is an attack. This isn't a review.
Yeah, I'd actually have to agree with you that it is. Piers Morgan and the other lady generally do attack, especially Piers Morgan. He generally attacks most of his guests. He does it for show more than anything. But this isn't a form of a show. This is a case of he generally disagrees with him and is generally after him. But I would say that this is a case of they're attacking him because of the ideas, not because of what he's written. And we can get into the reasons why when we go a little bit further.
Yep.
How anyone's ever going to finish a book if they can't finish a sentence?
Well, we can't discuss the entire book in 5 minutes.
No, but we can at least start.
Right? But Peter, let me finish it.
One thing that I'm trying to say.
If Britain is so in the cart, why are we still one of the 6 largest economies in the world?
Well, presumably because private debt or some other thing must be added into the size of the economy. We're only big because we have such enormous debt. We're on the brink of serious economic crisis. The whole West is, and when it happens, I think people will realise just what a fantasy our supposed power and influence are. You want to argue about that if you like. This book is about far more than that. In fact, it isn't really about that at all. It's about the foolish choices we've been making over the past half century, in which we've picked the wrong future, a disastrous criminal justice system, one of the worst education systems in the modern world, the trashing of our own culture so nobody knows it anymore or knows any of their history.
I have to completely agree with Mr. Hitchens there. Our education system is absolutely woeful to the point of it's almost a form of institutionalization with our education system.
Yep. And there's a thing. There's the thing they don't talk about. She's going on about, oh, we're more prosperous than we've ever been, as you'd expect, obviously, given that we're evolving all the time. Yeah. But here's the thing. We're not more literate than we've ever been.
No, that's true.
We were more literate between 1890 and 1950 than we are now, which is freaking insane. And given how internet-centric the world is now, that is practically a disability.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And another aspect to that, or another string to that bow as well, is even people that weren't literate and weren't able to read and write, they knew what words meant. They were able to articulate themselves with spoken word. They knew what the English language was. Just because they couldn't read and write didn't mean that they weren't educated. Another thing as well, with the idea of our British culture or our English culture being stripped away from us, yes, because our country doesn't let us learn our own history. And I mean that properly. We might go and visit a castle in year 6 or 7 and learn about the medieval times and things like that. We don't learn what led up to that point. We don't have a massive amount of history that we learn for ourselves or our own culture or identity.
And so much of it's just lies.
Yeah, pretty much as well, especially when it comes to things like the Crusades and things like that, and when it comes across to going across as colonialism and throwing slaves and things like that across, saying that we didn't even take anybody that was with us, even though that we took Spanish people with us and actually paid them, things like that, to go to America as well, by the way. And the way that people say that we absolutely decimated all the Indians as well that were over there, the Native Americans, that's factually incorrect as well. The reason why most of the Native Americans were actually perishing wasn't because we were going around killing all of them, especially at the beginning, mind you. It was because they were dying because we brought diseases over that they didn't have any immunity to. So does that mean that we're guilty by association, or does that mean that we intentionally sent over our sick people to kill them?
Well, they gave us syphilis as well, remember that?
Well, yeah, like, as I said, but we didn't really know what syphilis was back then either.
Yeah. Another thing with the culture thing, the education thing though as well, because I mean you could go on about the culture thing all day, and I think we touched on that before the video anyway, so that's okay. Yeah. But the education thing, right? My great-grandmother and great-grandfather left school at 14 and worked and were able to have houses off of one wage.
Yep.
My generation will be 36 on average before they can move out of their parents' house. So how is that better off? And what in God's name is the education system doing and the economic system doing if that's the case? And why does it take, 12 years of high school plus an additional 4 years at university just to create a functional human being when it only takes 6 years to train a surgeon?
Yep.
So why do they need us that long? Indoctrination.
Well, it's to be institutionalized. It's to make sure that people are not free thinkers. Because there's a lovely thing that I've heard of before. When people go to university, they actually learn. When they're at high school or secondary school, they're taught. There is
yes, very well put.
There is a difference. A lot of biologists and people like that will always come out and say, whatever you learn in your science class or GCSEs and things like that, when you go to university, the first thing that your lecturers tell you is forget everything that you've learned because it's wrong.
They do that in school as well, but anyway, I'll let you carry on with the video.
Fair enough.
The general decay of behaviour, and they're tremendous.
No, he's explaining what he sees around him and is trying to explain it, rather than living in a fucking rose-tinted glasses world because you're too high on your own farts.
Yeah, and there's something coming up that I want people to listen out for. There's, two things. The first thing is that they accuse him of, all this stuff because they're out of touch and he's not. He actually knows what's going on to the real people in this country. And the other thing is Dan Snow, the other guy they've got on, is going to project the nostalgia thing onto Peter Hitchens when Dan Snow's whole career has been romanticizing the past.
Yeah, there's a specific thing that I really love about this interview. Obviously, as I said before, we've watched this before. In fact, crumplepoint sent me the video and I watched it to make sure that it was good enough for my audience. And
thoroughly vetted.
Yeah, thoroughly vetted, yeah. And Dan Snow completely and utterly misquotes and fucking uses what Hitchens is actually saying in his book, to the point where he actually says, "Oh, women had it really, really fucking bad." He's like, "I haven't fucking wrote anything about that." Well, not in those words, but basically. Anyway, rather than me trying to orientate what actually happened, why don't you actually watch and listen?
Organised neglect of children who now turn up at school not knowing how to go to the lavatory. That's what we've achieved.
My kids turned up school and knew how to use a lavatory.
Congratulations, Piers, but you're not perhaps typical of modern British life.
I went to a comprehensive school. I went to a lavatory every day.
Congratulations again.
Who are these
This is
people?
too much information. Read what teachers say.
All right, that's
Read what teachers say.
Dan, you have described this book as the deranged ravings of a mad, nostalgic man.
I think they are the...
Listen to the way that the way that she just introduced Dan Snow. You dislike this book because you say that he's a deranged man and it's a nostalgic, evil old man. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but the most of the phrases were actually in there. That's an amazing way of trying to be an impartial interview, isn't it? Trying to project a book. Because remember, that's the reason why he's gone on there. He's paid them so he can come on and advertise his book. That's literally what he's done. Hitchens has done. And now he's being attacked for trying to say that being British is a good thing, the British culture was a good thing, and looking back and being a little bit nostalgic, even though he doesn't actually do that in a book, but even says that it is a good thing because it makes us take stock and value of what we do have and what we don't have.
Also, the delusional ravings of a nostalgic madman is not a literary criticism.
No.
Which I don't think Dan Snow's read the book. I fully don't believe it.
Well, if he did read the book, what he would actually be saying what the book actually entails and what it is, rather than projecting what he thinks the book's going to be written about, as in Donald Trump's "Let's take us back to the 1950s." Anyway, rather than us projecting and fucking orientating what's going to happen, let's actually listen and watch.
Fever dreams of someone who believes that the past was a wonderful place. And let me tell you, the past...
Well, then you haven't read it. You simply have not read it, if you think that. Well, I have not read the book. It doesn't say that. It's not about that. I have.
Sorry, I love that from Dan Snow. He's like, but you're interrupted. It's like, yeah, because like you can tell Hitchens is thinking this. Yeah, because you're a cunt and you're not fucking read the book and you're misquoting what you think I'm thinking and what I wrote about. Fucking ridiculous from fucking left-wing media at that point. Ridiculous.
Yep.
Anything to add, mate?
Oh, it's just that, as Rich, oh, you're interrupting me. Well, what's been going on for the last 5 minutes? The Hitchens.
Well, let's be honest. The reason why he's doing that is because he wants to carry on his tirade of trying to pretend he knows what he's talking about. That's the reason why he's saying, "Oh, don't interrupt," or "You're interrupting," rather.
Yeah, and Hitchens' book is. I've not read it yet. I'm going to buy it after this. I've not read his book.
I might get on order, to be fair.
I read his column, and it's part of a large body of work. He has a theme that he deals with, and he never goes on about, oh, we need to return to the past. What he talks about is what the institutions we had were, the attitudes we had were, and what those were leading to, and how those were cut off at the knees and what's happened. He's never once said, oh, well, that, fucking Henry VIII chap, we should go and re-elect him. Nothing like that.
Yeah, no, I know. The thing is with Hitchens is he's such an intelligent. To be fair, his brother was much better, but Peter Hitchens is quite an intelligent man, and he knows what he's talking about. He does his research, and whether you agree with him or not, it's very hard to argue his points when he is as researched and as polished as what he is, even if you disagree with him.
You just correct me for interrupting you.
I thought I'd join in. It's my book we're talking about, not his. He gets on TV all the time.
Over 100 years ago, so at the start of the First World War, when you were born, you had a life expectancy as a man of 48 years old. If you survived a myriad of childhood diseases, you would go and you would work in a place where you were far more likely than today to be killed or seriously harmed in the workplace. If you survived until retirement, which was very unlikely, you would spend a few years of bone-crushing poverty going to the toilet in a hole in your backyard. Women, don't even start me on.
Can everybody see Hitchens' face there? He's like, these people are idiots. These people are morons. This is not my book.
Yeah, and I think that's apparent to the audience if they go into it with an empty cup, as it were, and just listen to what's going on, because they are saying, ha, obviously the past sucked. It's like, yes. Does that have anything to do with the book? That's what I want to know. It obviously doesn't.
Exactly. Right, let's see how Mr. Hitchens unfortunately has to defend his position from these people that are, what would actually be the correct term there? Misprinting, misspeaking, basically fucking lying. Basically, they can't be slandering because they're not actually sullying his name, so to speak. They're
delusional ravings of a fever-dreamed, deranged madman is pretty slanderous.
That's definitely slanderous. Yeah, I can't argue with that one. That one's slanderous. Right, come on then, Hitchens. Let's hear what you got to say.
Women had a terrible life. Living
longer, were healthier. If you'll excuse me, what has this to do with my book? Well, absolutely nothing.
Well,
two parts of nothing at all. It has nothing to do with what I'm saying. I am not calling for the return of the past. I am not a nostalgist. I did not enjoy the 50s, which I lived in and you didn't. I have absolutely no desire for the 50s. I don't think the 50s were a golden age. I don't think the past was a golden age. I think we have spent the past 50 or 60 years making the wrong choices and choosing the wrong future.
Do you accept?
And I made this argument, first of all. I published this book 19 years ago and was targeted with geysers of slime of this kind from people who hadn't read it. And yet the book still survives in print 19 years later and thousands.
Sorry, I was going to let him carry on, but I couldn't. It's fine for them to introduce Dan Snow by saying that Dan Snow is called Hitchens, all the horrible names that he did, a nostalgia, raving lunatics of a madman. But as soon as he said a geezers of slime, meaning that there is somebody that is literally shooting out lots of slime every now and again when he speaks, in other words, being a slime ball for nowadays, everybody gasps.
See, I didn't take it that way. I took it as what he was saying was slime.
Yeah, that's why I said when he speaks, it's full of slime. Yeah,
so it's like saying you're deranged and me saying you talk shite.
Yes.
I'm saying what you say is shite, you know what I mean? Like, whereas you're deranged is an insult. But I mean, you could argue, I don't know, I'm not inside Peter's head. Maybe he was actually insulting the guy. I don't think he was, though. He's not that sort. He's too above that.
Well, I don't know. Even if he was insulting him, he was insulting what he said, not what he is.
Well, see, if you've ever seen Peter Hitchens insult somebody, you fucking know when he's insulted somebody.
Yeah, especially if it's a Russell Brand. Russell Brand's the theme of tonight's stream. But yeah, that's the reason why I had to stop the video at that point. Simply because they introduce him as a raving lunatic, basically. And then when he says, oh, yeah, well, you're talking shit, as Crumplepoint quite eloquently put, it's a case of they're a gasp. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to say. How dare you say he's talking shit? As I do always, I find with the left, just hypocritical in the way that they speak. Do what I say, don't do what I do.
It's really quite embarrassing to watch them as well, because if you and I mainly watch or listen to podcasts or watch long discussions on YouTube or formal debates. So to then go from that to seeing this, it's like a 6-minute segment where everybody's shouting over each other and going, "Hey, you guys, it's like, do you guys look at yourself? It's embarrassing."
Yep. Even if it was just meant to be a discussion, I personally love watching discussions more than I like watching debates. I think debates are too formal, and I don't think that they get enough time to be able to air what they actually want to say. So I prefer myself watching discussions. But even with discussions, even when they start getting heated, generally people that are having the discussions generally have enough about themselves and enough respect for the other person to realize eventually that they're talking over somebody and it doesn't turn into a bitch fest for the next hour. And this is just 6 minutes, 8 minutes long. And all it's been is, well, this is my book. No, you can't tell us about your book because we're going to tear it down. That's literally all this has been. I've me being if I was Peter Hitchens, I've paid for my advertising slot, so to speak, on Good Morning because I think it's a good idea. It gives a good chance of being able to speak with people about my book. Maybe they'll be intelligent enough to understand what's going on. Gets there and he's like, "Fuck, I've gone to Rugrats. I am in the playgroup."
Yep.
Right, come on there, Mr. Hitchens. Let's fucking have you.
Thousands of people buy it because they understand, unlike him, what it means.
Do you accept that this country, like most parts of the world, is now a safer statistically place to live? Fewer people are being killed.
Again, that's factually incorrect. As if you mean more people are not dying, then you're correct. But if you mean that more people are being killed, you are factually incorrect. People are dying at a very high rate at this moment in time, especially in London and especially in the rural boroughs just outside of London.
Yes, and another thing about the prosperity was Hitchens quipped that it's probably to do with debt or something like that. And yes, the Bank of England and the Treasury both factor in the national debt as part of GDP, which is why GDP is so high.
Yep. Yep, completely and utterly correct. But the fact is that it's like any banking system, the more debt that you're allowed to accrue, even if you don't have the money, say for instance, I don't have 100 grand, but if I can find myself a 1,500 or up to a whatever, I can find 10% of that, then I can actually go and get 100 grand and I can go buy a house. The thing is, that doesn't mean that I have the capital to be able to generate 100 grand. It means that I'm borrowing it. But yet, at that point in time, I can go and buy something for 100 grand. It's the same thing with accumulated debt. It's a case of you have this debt, which means that you're going to eventually pay it back. So you actually have a high GDP. We can actually enforce it more. You've actually got a good, healthy credit rating. Hence why when the financial crash happened, we were rated a AA creditor, and now we're only rated as an A creditor. Our credit went down. That's the reason why, first of all, we were 5th biggest economy in the world, and now we've dropped down to the 6th.
Yep. And much like them measuring our wealth based on how much money we don't have, they're measuring their own intelligence by how much information they don't understand about his book.
Yep. If anybody actually watches South Park, they are literally sniffing their own farts to make themselves sound intelligent. Right, come on then, Mr. Piers Morgan, let us have it.
Actually, it's healthier. We're living longer and we're healthier than we've ever been before.
I'm not questioning any of this. You haven't read it either.
We're more prosperous than we've ever been before. There are positives.
I know I keep on stopping it, and I'm sorry. But literally, Hitchens has just said, I'm not saying in any of this, 4 times in this interview in a 4-minute period. You can tell he's getting flustered, the same as any fucker would do when they're literally going, "You're misquoting me. You're telling me that the book says something when it doesn't. You haven't read the book."
And none of them are disputing that, by the way. Not one of them has said, "Actually, Peter, I have read the book quite thoroughly, and, you know..."
This is my interpretation, yeah. They just go, "No, this is what script I've been given, and you can fuck off."
Yep.
I can't deviate from the script, so no matter how many times you tell me I'm wrong, I'm just going to have to keep going with it.
About the state of this country.
There are other things than the material. I'm not arguing about any of those things particularly.
What are the bad choices
Prosperity based on debt seems to me to be slightly a slightly poor ground on which to stand.
The British Empire was assembled with the largest state debt ever the state project of state debt ever embarked on by.
I don't doubt it, but we were at that time we were expanding, not shrinking, and we were exporting, not importing, and we didn't have the gigantic deficit that we have. And we also the main debt that we have.
Peter, what do you want us to do?
Well, I don't want you to do anything. I've written this book so that future civilizations looking it out will understand how a prosperous, free, and an extremely well-governed country trashed its constitution, trashed its culture, and threw itself.
Do you like anything about this country?
Oh, I love this country, but
I love that when somebody criticizes the country. If say for instance you had an American that says, right, well, I want to make this country better, and this is what I see that's wrong with it. You're anti-American. You're anti-British. You're anti-this. No, the reason why I'm actually doing this is because I love my country and I feel that I can make it better by making these stringent points and pointing out that this is criticism. When did it come such a bad problem for somebody to be able to point out a criticism and then for them to say, well, you don't care about the country? Nor do you then, Piers Morgan, if you're not fucking interested in criticism of the country to make it fucking better.
Well, this is the centre, the British centre, which is actually quite far left. The centre left and the far left trying to play both in the nationalist card and the anti-nationalist card at the same time, and they're telling themselves and not doing it, because what they're doing is they're saying, this is the best country in the world, and they're also saying, nationalism is bad. And it's like, if you think this is the best country in the world, why are you trying to change it beyond all recognition? Like, why do we need to elect Chairman Corbyn to change everything that makes Britain Britain if you love the country so much?
Yeah. No, I completely not agree with that. To where you have people that are in fucking Birmingham University saying that we should get rid of the English flag, not the Union Jack, but St. George's Cross. We should get rid of that because it's a racist flag. That's
this is why there's such a rise in Scottish nationalism, by the way, because if you have a thing and then you destroy it, then people's sort of attitudes revert back to whatever the thing was before. What did we have before we had British nationalism? We had Scottish nationalism or English nationalism, depending on where you lived. And British nationalism has been absolutely destroyed, which has meant that people have been like, well, I still like where I live. I still like the country. I still feel nationalistic. I'm a Scottish nationalist, you know?
Yeah, you really need to watch my video that I did on the Scottish independence fallacy.
Yes, I shall indeed.
Because I really do touch on those fallacies and the fallacy points as well. How so many people push for the idea of Scottish nationalism, but if you were to push for the nationalism of England, then you're racist and bigoted. And that's the reason why I called it a fallacy. Because it's okay for everybody on the left to push the idea of a Scottish independence, but not okay for the England to push their own independence from the EU.
Yeah, the Scottish thing's seen as homely and, you know, sensible and a little bit romantic, whereas English nationalism's seen as dirty and toxic and racist. It's really weird.
Yeah. If anybody's still watching, because I don't really know, and if you are, thank you for being with us. But I do love that video. It took me a while to make, and it took me a while to not script, but sort of structure. I think I did quite well on that video, especially giving a little bit of hope as well for a Brexit, which is Irish Brexit, so to speak. So yeah, I thought that was a good video. Anyway, back on with this video. I'm being a shill.
We're getting there.
I've done what do I like about it now? What's left? I love the countryside. I love Shakespeare. I love all those things which the Cultural Revolution has yet to destroy. But if you want me to make a program for you about all the things I love about this country, it would be a list of things which are under threat.
And they would be things that would be fairly nostalgic.
No, nostalgia is.
Sorry again. He just said that he wanted, if he was to do a show to say what he thinks is British and what to protect, he would do a show on the things that are under threat. Oh, but that means that they're nostalgic. No, it means that they're under threat. Literally, you're taking words, completely and utterly transmuting them and spitting them out as something completely fucking different.
Yeah, and being a traditionalist or having affection for old things is not the same as nostalgia. Nostalgia is elevating things from the past to be better than they were.
Yeah, I've always been under the description of if something works, don't fix it because it doesn't need to be fixed if something already works. But at the same time, you have to understand what processes were beforehand to be able to make something better. You can't just tear something down that did work but now is starting not to and completely dismantle that and start anew. You have to improve it, not destroy it. And I think a lot of people are just going, oh, you're being nostalgic. This is the way that the Cultural Revolution, as Hitchens would actually describe it as, is the fact that people are going, anything to do with the idea of Britain or Britishness is a case of you're looking at it as a nostalgia point of view and you want to go back to the time of the colonials or the imperials. And that's not the case. If you like having tea, you like having tea. That doesn't mean that I want to persecute and fucking rape Indians. If you like having biscuits, it doesn't mean that I want to go over to Jamaica and start fucking nicking their ginger and fucking raping them all over again, does it? It's ridiculous when people actually go, oh, well, what do you like about being Britain? I don't really know, to be honest, anymore. I like the centre of the fact of being British. Yeah, but what does that mean? Well, that means the moralistic points and some of the cultural aspects of the stiff upper lip, the fact of being able to have banter and not worry about if another man's going to punch me in the face. Look, those type of things are what makes me British and proud to be British. I mean, there are lots of others I'm fucking trying to do it as quickly as possible. But if I was to say that to certain people, oh, you're being nostalgic, or in some cases, you're being racist. And that's a ridiculous statement for anybody to fucking make. Because what they're doing here is instead of calling him nostalgic, they're trying to imply that because he's nostalgic, he wants to go back to this imperialism or this nostalgic view of being racist and bigoted. As you quite rightly said, Crumplepoint, it's a case of them trying to one-upmanship themselves and then getting themselves completely and utterly tongue-tied in a fucking naval knot.
Yeah, and all they have to do is shout at him loud enough and make him look silly. That's their only goal, because they're hoping that the punters watching this, that'll be enough to sway them, which it will, because if they throw enough buzzwords around,
yeah,
people will just believe it. It's like, oh, the person that I see on the TV every morning has said that this person is bad. He must be bad.
Do you know one thing that I really hate about the left? And yes, the right wing do this. When they say, oh, the white wing dog whistles, it's like, yeah, they do. But do you know what you do as well? You dog whistle. You don't do it to the same extent as what the right wing do because they don't have power over media. But you still change words so people don't pick up on it, apart from the people that are looking for it. That's the definition of dog whistling.
Well, it's really funny because, as you say, that's exactly the definition of dog whistling. And it's that, right? But what they've done is they've actually turned the word dog whistle into a dog whistle.
Yeah.
Because now dog whistle means
racist.
Secret Nazi, which is not what dog whistle means. So they've actually turned that into a dog whistle. It's remarkable piece of mental fuckery.
Which you have to kind of admire, to be fair.
I don't know, man. It's more like watching somebody accidentally dig themselves into a pit that's like incredibly deep. It's like you can admire them for digging for so long, but I'm not admiring them because they can't get out again.
I suppose you're one of the people that would look at them and then go, yeah, that's fucking shit. Where I'm one of those people that goes, here, have a shovel.
I would just be filling in the hole over the top of them.
Oh, right. Come on, Mr. Hitchens.
Nostalgia is a desire to return to the past, which I don't have. The past is dead. It could not be brought back in if I wanted to. What I'm concerned about is the future, as anybody actually has to be, even if, particularly if they have children who are going to live in it. But my problem with this is that I've been warning against the self-destruction of this country for a very long time, urging specific remedies to it, which nobody pays any attention to. And I've given up. I was only making myself unhappy trying to persuade people to do sensible things.
You sound
we have lived in the past 19 years.
You're the new victim.
All I have to say to this is, wow, I've given up on trying to make things better. It's just like, that's what children do. I don't want to talk. I want to talk. Something's fucking happened. I'm annoyed. Anything to add, Mr. Crumplepoint?
No, not just now. Not on that one. Just an agreement.
That's fair enough.
Aren't you? I mean, I'm not. No, you completely misunderstand the point. When I wrote this book, When I wrote this book, Tony Blair was popular. Everyone said how wonderful he was. What a great prime minister he was. No, he's not. Or is it, you're an idiot? How can you possibly say that? Well, opinions changed too late. Now everybody understands the Blair era was a disaster. I knew it at the time. I'm telling you at the time, things are bad now.
Dan,
I think but writing like this is not just deranged, but it's actually dangerous because it gives it.
He just called him deranged again, but you know.
Yes, and he says writing like this.
Yeah.
Like what?
Yes, because they haven't actually talked about the actual book at all, because every time that they actually bring up any sort of point, Hitchens very cleverly goes, well, that's not what the book is. Because it's not what the book is.
If we say writing like this, and Dan Snow's talking about the book, well, he's not quoted anything from the book, so I don't know. And if he's saying writing like this, as in writing that sounds like the way Peter Hitchens is talking, well, what's dangerous about saying Tony Blair's a fucking idiot?
Well, that's the thing. I was going to stop it a couple of times when it was a case of, oh, I knew Tony Blair was thinking, and then you had the woman pipe up going, blah, blah, blah. It's like, wow, that's a spurge. And now you've got him coming out going, oh, well, we're writing like this, which, believe it or not, you could quite easily interpret it as a actual proper dog whistle for saying, as crumplepoint suggested, speaking like this. Because that's what people are going to interpret it as, because you're not giving any evidence for it. So people are going to go, what do you mean by writing like this? Oh, you mean speaking like this?
Yeah, and it's interesting because anyone who's ever had the misfortune of watching a Dan Snow history documentary will know that he is like a white knight for the status quo. So what he's doing is he's saying, basically, criticism is dangerous. Like, be a good thinker, comrades. That's basically his attitude. Because if you watch any of his stuff, if you can stomach it, I usually switch it off. But he just romanticizes everything and criticizes all the good stuff, basically. Like, and yeah, like it's like that thing of everything has to be nice and cuddly and very BBC, you know, like.
Yeah.
It's never anything. You're not allowed to criticize things. You're not allowed to ask hard questions. You're not allowed to maybe question the truth of the history you've been taught. It's like, no, this happened, and we're amazing, and look how enlightened we all are now.
Yeah, yeah. See, that's one thing that I've always noticed about the status quo and teaching and things like that. They don't want critical thinkers, and they don't want criticism of how other people think either. Because if you can criticize what's happening, that means that you can have an emotional connection and you can have an emotional reaction. And if you show an emotion and have a charismatic personality, you can draw people towards you. If you can draw people towards you, you can make a movement. If you can make a movement, you have a political power. If you have political power, you can take control.
Yeah, I've started to prefer the terms left wing and right wing, by the way, because I've found that the right wing are liberal and radical, and the left wing are extremely conservative in that they want the status quo and nothing is to change and everything is to be very settled and stagnant and remain the same.
That's a really interesting take, to be fair. Saying, I do understand your point. I do understand your point, and I'm not criticizing it. But I do actually find that very, very interesting point to say that people on the left are a form of conservative, because obviously conservatism is the case of preserving the status quo and keeping everything as is. And I do seem to, as a certain extent, some leftists, and that's what they want to do. They want to keep things as the status quo, i.e. the EU, for instance. Most people didn't vote on it because they weighed everything up that were on Remain. And no, I'm not taking oh, you didn't understand what you were doing. It was a case of they just wanted to keep things the way they were. They didn't want to put any effort into it. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's up to them. But then you get those type of people that are so staunch because they don't want to change anything, not because they've researched anything. So I actually agree with you on your point of view there.
Thank you.
Right, come on then, Mr. Snow. Let's have a look.
Like deranged in civilized debate. Why should I listen to you if you say deranged?
You did call him slime.
No, Piers Morgan, he didn't. He said he spews slime. It just goes to show you that you don't understand fucking language. If he's saying geyser of slime, he's saying that it spews out at a time, which insinuates that he's saying that when he speaks, he's speaking slime.
Which calling somebody deranged, etc., as we've already said, pretty good qualification.
Yeah, but the thing is, Hitchens making it. Well, he always makes extremely good points. But if you're going to call me deranged, how can I have a civilized debate with you? If you're going to say that my writing is deranged, how am I going to be able to have a debate about you about the book? Because you've already made up your mind. It means that there's no point in me talking to you about the book, so there's no debate to have.
Yeah,
Even though
he's saying that it's dangerous. He's saying the writing is dangerous, or the speech. He's saying that Peter Hitchens is deranged,
Yep,
and a madman, and he is saying he's not disputed that he's not read the book. He's never once said, "Actually, I have read the book." He's not quoted the book, and now he's basically panicking and trying to insult him as much as possible because he's needing to cover up his own inadequacy.
yeah, his own fucking inadequacies. Yeah. I bet his missus does. So sorry, I'm not going to go down that road. Right, come on then, Mr. Snow and Mr. Hitchens. Let's have it.
Especially if you called him slime.
You said he was a geezer of
No,
slime.
I didn't. You said he was a geezer of slime. Because it provides, it provides, and I use this term very reluctantly, it provides the intellectual underpinning of Trumpism. Because if you try to deal...
Oh my god, that's the reasons why they're so fucking against it, because they see the idea of America first, or the idea of the nation state, or anything to do with that is the idea of Trumpism. If you were to put Hitchens into the idea of talking about Trump, he would absolutely despise him, and he does. So to compare him about the idea of Trumpism is absolutely fucking ludicrous, and a point of a dog whistle to the left to say this is a bad book.
I had a funny reaction to that because I do absolutely think that that's the case, but I had a funny reaction to it because I said, when he said, "This is the underpinnings of," and I was expecting Hitler, fascism,
yeah.
And he said Trumpism, and it's like he might as well have said vanilla ice cream. I was like, well, that's it, Trumpism, like the opinion of half the American population.
Yeah.
Okay. Yikes!
Well,
Like what?
You have to remember that over half of the people voted Hitler in, and look how that turned out.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so funny because it's like, yeah, well, we don't need to defend Donald Trump. He speaks for himself, but and we don't need to criticize him because all the media does that. But it's just the case of it's like he's a completely mainstream politician now. He's the president of the United States. Like anybody, it just comes across as this hysterical overreaction. It's like, oh, it's Trumpism. It's like, what, wearing red hats?
That's the thing that I really dislike about the left. Trump is a buffoon. He hasn't done anything that's wrong. He hasn't done anything that's hindered the USA. He hasn't done anything like, I don't know, have the mass amount of deportations in the fucking known history of the US. He hasn't done anything like silence the world's press the most since, God knows, since Watergate. He hasn't done any of those things. He hasn't almost sent the fucking economy into a world crash. He hasn't gone and bombed the most people out of any president ever, including the Second World War, and then won a Peace Prize because of it. Yes, I'm talking about Obama.
Yeah, I mean that was the thing. It's just like Trumpism is, even if you think Trump's bad, it's just like he's bad in the same way that, like, I don't know, fucking John Major was bad. He was a bit rubbish. Like it's not like fucking Mussolini has risen again.
Oh, I don't
but
know.
Don't worry, that comparison is coming, by the way. But it's just like it shows you how hysterical these people are.
Yeah, but the thing is with the John Major quote, you could quite easily say that he was one of our most authoritarian prime ministers that we've ever actually had, simply because he didn't let us have a vote if we wanted to go in politically with the European Union. He just decided, yeah, it'll be fine, and just went in. He didn't even let Parliament vote on it.
Oh, don't get me wrong. He was pish, but he wasn't Gorbachev, you know? Like...
No, I know. I was just being picky. All right, come on then, Mr. Snow. Let it rain.
The modern world and everything we've achieved. You are saying what we need is someone like from Mussolini onwards, a strong man, a Trump and Erdogan, Mussolini, who can come in, Putin, who can come in and return us to some purified
That's
why this book is dangerous. And the modern world's got problems, but we need to improve on it, not abandon it.
That is the purest tribe. Donald Trump is the fault of people like you. Complacent, isolated.
I know Mr. Hitchens is going to defend himself on this one.
He's going to destroy him.
Which is, I think it's absolutely great. But the thing is, this person has just compared his book and his writing and his ideals to Trump, Mussolini, and all authoritarian fascists that are supposed to be around. He wrote this book 19 years ago. Trump wasn't around as a politician then. The idea of fascism politics modernly was not even conceived at that point in time. And yet,
he's also compared four leaders who have almost nothing in common as well.
Very much so, yes. You couldn't really say that Trump is anything like fucking Mussolini.
Putin, let's look at Putin. He's trying to bring in, let's say, mixed market, but massive free market reforms, like big business coming back to Russia, breaking up monopolies, but a steady government hand on it. So quite heavy-handed government regulation, but breaking up the oligarchy and all that pish, right? But he also wants a religious revival and all that. Erdogan is a corporatist, authoritarian nutbag who is motivated by his religion, like Islam, which is you could say, okay, Putin is motivated by religion as well, but it's two completely different religions for a start, and his approach towards markets and defense and national policy and stuff are completely different to Putin's.
Yeah.
Mussolini is like, well, fucking, I think that any sensible, rational human being can see the flaw in that argument. And then all those three people compared to Trump.
Yeah.
A billionaire
socialite
who threw his hat in the ring for the presidency race and won. Like,
yeah, exactly. No, I'm completely with you. And then you have to compare all those four people, which are completely different in ideology and the way that they implement things, to Mr. Hitchens, who is nothing like them. If you were to ask him what he is, he would actually be what Sargon would say is a classical liberal. He is the existential version of a British liberal.
Mm-hmm.
Apart from when it comes to drugs, so then he's definitely conservative.
Mm-hmm.
But apart from that, let's witness the pain.
Too well off and too privileged to know how bad life is. How bad life is for most people. Well, of course, it is the fault of what I called in 1999 the liberal elite, a term which is now come into common use and wasn't then. They ignored all these things. They wouldn't listen to the unhappiness of the millions of people who saw their lives being trashed by them, and as a result, they ended up with Trump. And it's not my fault. If people had listened to what I was saying, we wouldn't have got this.
I do think it's time, Peter, you ran for high office. I think it's the only answer.
It's not possible. There is
all the greatness of this country.
It's not possible. No major political party, and the political parties in this country are the filters which stand between anybody in Parliament. None of them would ever give me a seat.
Peter,
so it's not possible.
Any watching may think that's a travesty.
Oh, wow. Oh, many were thinking that's a tragedy. I don't want you to go into politics because I disagree with you.
But notice how they were like dead serious at the start, and then he trounced them, and then they're like, "Oh, you should lighten up."
Basically,
because they knew they were beat. It's quite funny. But the other thing is, like he said, well, the liberal elite was pretty damning, like because that is very commonly used now, and it wasn't then. And he's right. And the thing is, like, this is a thing that was what made my ears really prick up, was like when he was saying about, like, school-age kids going to school shitting themselves, not knowing how to use the toilet. It's common. It's not uncommon in this country now.
Yeah, I mean, he's not talking about fucking people in high school and things like that. He's literally talking about people that are starting reception and fucking year one that literally are not potty trained.
Yeah,
they don't know where the toilet is.
This is common, and people like you and me know that. And Piers Morgan doesn't even believe that this is a real thing. But you and me, anybody who knows somebody who has kids, knows that there are kids in the primary 1 class or the year 1 class who don't know how to read at all, can barely speak, and can't use the toilet. And we know this, and it's just part of everyday life now, and it wasn't before.
Yep, I completely and utterly agree.
And they don't believe him. That's how out of touch they are. They think that he's making it up.
Well, the thing is, they just because he's sorry. Let me speak. Because Hitchinson, for fuck's sake, because Peter, because he's saying things that are against what their ideologies are and how they see the world, and because he's going against the status quo, as we've already talked about, because he's going against the idea of how progressive the country is now going. They feel attacked. They feel alienated. They feel that their identity is at risk and their political structure is at risk. What are they going to do? They're going to attack him. The thing is, he's on their side. All he's doing is pointing out the flaws that are going to happen in a couple of years' time with the working class.
Mm-hmm. And if you look, I know he's posh and he's well off, but he works very bloody hard and he talks sense. And the thing is that Peter Hitchens talks about things. And this is the thing, you said he always makes good points, and that's true. Even when he's wrong or I disagree with him, I can still concede that he made a good point.
Yes.
And the thing is, he's talking about shit that actually affects not even just working, but middle class people as well in this country. Like, yeah, kids going to school not able to shit themselves. The fact that there are drug epidemics across the whole country in every city, and all the young people are, well, not all of them, but like so many young people are into drugs. The fact that the prisons are overrun. The fact that nobody gives a shit if they go to prison. Like, these are things that actually, if you talk to people in real life, it's happening in their lives or it's concerning them.
Yep.
And these people that he speaks to on the TV don't believe him, don't think it's a thing, or, worst of all, think that it's not worth worrying about and everything's going fine. Oh, we don't need to take the drug problem seriously. Oh, we don't need to take the prisons seriously. Oh, there's not really much we can do about crime. Oh, the criminals are just disenfranchised and we need to look after them and give them a cuddle. Like,
yeah, no. See, the thing is that people like when Hitchens has already just said the people that he classifies as liberal elite that are well off and well to do and know what they're doing, they don't see themselves as that. They see themselves as common people, and they're not. People like Piers Morgan and people that are presenters and things like that, yeah, okay, they're not fucking super rich, and nobody would ever say that they are. But they are of the liberal elite. They are of higher or middle class. Simple as that. And the thing is, they honestly do feel that they are part of the mainstream. They honestly do feel that they are part of the working class and they are in touch with them. Because, you know, they've got that house that's in that gated off community at the end of the road. They're not part of the community as in the sense of knowing what's actually going on. They just assume that they know what's going on because they get their news spoon-fed to them and they don't have to interact with people that are of class. They don't have to deal with people on the tube or on the train or anything else like that. They get taxied to fucking work. They get lemoed to fucking work.
yeah, and like you say, and this is where the term, echo chamber comes from. Where do these are journalists. Where do they get their news? Other journalists.
Yep.
Echo chamber. Piers Morgan talks to the women across from him there. They provide each other with news. None of it relates to the real world.
Yep.
Dan Snow is talking about history as found in history books. Peter Hitchens is talking about stuff that he goes and digs up. And he shows his sources, by the way. That's the other thing.
Yeah, Hitchens always has done. He's never said anything where he can't provide a source. If he does,
and if he's making a moral claim, he says that as well.
Yeah. As I just literally just said, if he doesn't know or has a source, he says, "This is my opinion."
Yep.
Right. I think now that's pretty much all we've got time for. I mean, we've been going for for a fucking while there. We've been going for 3 hours and a half.
Yes, I think that's a good place to leave it if you're happy with that.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I'm ready for bed. Right. If you wanted to give your last word, as you said that you have something that you wanted to say, and I will give mine, and then I'm going to fuck off.
Sounds like an excellent plan, especially the fucking off part. I'm getting tired as well, but
I really can't wait.
No, I've had a really good time. It's been a really good chat. Pity Jensen couldn't have stayed with us to the end, but it was still fun. And yeah, just my final word was just quickly going to be about the civic nationalism idea of that's what's going to save people. Like, not extreme nationalism, but like civic nationalism, because as far as I can tell, it's the only political ideology that affinity it has, and the people it looks after are the people in the geographical area that it looks after. It takes care of them, and that's its priority. Ethnic nationalism, the ethnicity, is more important than the country. Socialism is more important than the country. Communism, the international empire of communism, more important than the country. Whereas civic nationalism is like, no, this is the border and the people in it need looked after, and that's the priority. And I can't really think of a better use or a better way of governing. So that's my antidote for all the problems we're discussing.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I've been a big advocate of civic nationalism for a very long time. I think I explained civic nationalism when I was on with Ogre and a Britisher on the first couple of times that I went on with them. So yeah, I'm definitely a proprietor of civic nationalism. I don't really have too much to say, to be fair, for my final word. Which, no, it's not going to be a diatribe, and no, I'm not going to be going on for fucking ages. I really don't have too much to say. I should have a video hopefully coming out tomorrow, which will be about Russell Brand. Yay. That one should be about Sweden and how he thinks that nationalism is bad and has no idea, and it's about xenophobia and racism. And I'll be showing him directly and with sources the reason why people are saying that rape has gone up by 30-something% in the last decade. If the person didn't know their rapist or know the person who raped them, 80-something%, I think it's 81, 82%, are of foreign-born nationals. 52% of rape has now increased as well in general in Sweden. There are no-go areas in Sweden themselves where they literally have to be escorted by either police, which are armed, or by the National Guard themselves to be able to get an ambulance through Sweden or to be able to put a fire out. In one of the stories I'll be showing, even with a police escort, the fire brigade had to abandon putting a fire out in a community because they were being threatened and had fights going on around, and the police couldn't actually keep control anymore, so they had to let the building burn to the ground. So when people say, oh, civic nationalism or nationalism in itself is rising, there's a reason for it. If the left are not going to talk about the conversations and the only people who are going to talk about the conversations are racists, then those racists are going to be the ones that actually receive the vote of the people, because they're talking about the issues that actually affect the people around them. It's not hard to work out how populism or politics itself actually is. If you listen to the people and you do what the people say and what the people want, you'll be elected. It's not fucking hard. So, yeah, we're going to do that for tomorrow, hopefully, if I can be bothered to stay up and actually do it. If not, it will be Wednesday. But yeah, those two videos will come out. Apart from that, if anybody wants to talk about the idea of civic nationalism and things like that, I do actually have a video, and I have shielded it for 3 times now. But the video on the Scottish independence fallacy is a fucking good video, and it does draw parallels between the nationalism of Scotland and the nationalism of the United Kingdom, and how one is racist and bigoted, but the other one is celebrated by the left. So it'll be interesting if for that parallel. And I know that there is a lot of talk at this moment in time about Scotland having another referendum, even though everybody that ever did anything to do with the first referendum, said that it was once in a generation. In fact, I have Nicola Sturgeon on that video saying it about 6 times on purpose. So it will draw into people's head that she was the one who said it was once in a lifetime. Surprising how that seems to echo as well through the independence fallacy as well with the United Kingdom from the EU. Interesting, isn't it? But that being said, everybody, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video. I know it's been a very, very long video and I'm very tired, but you know what it's like when people start getting talking and it's been a long while and you can bounce off of each other. It's a case of people end up talking. But that's the whole point of this channel anyway. So thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much. And I will speak to you very soon. And I'll see you all again real soon. So bye-bye for now.